Chapter 13:13. The huge Lael was projecting the orc girl's appearance on the stage. She was so frightened that her body curled up. She even felt like she was being executed in public. She had to pick up the tablecloth and wrap it around her body. This was the core part of the whole plan. However, the performer suddenly stopped performing. No matter how many special effects were added on this huge stage, it was all in vain. "Come on, little girl. Yes, you look great like this too. I love you so much. Sister, sister. Come on, come on." The moment the tear gland started working, a few cheering voices sounded outside the compound surgical technique. The orc girl opened her eyes and saw Will and the others. While the knights were at a loss of what to do and the magicians were racking their brains, the few ordinary people who didn't even have any special abilities broke the silence and uneasiness with their loudest voices. "You look cool like this too. Black skin or whatever, I like it the most. You're the best. I like it the most. I like it the most." She put her hands in front of her mouth and yelled with all her might. Her voice sounded like an ACG performance. You guys, the orc girl's eyes were blurred. She didn't know if it was because of her blurred vision, but she seemed to see Luaccio turn from a stone into a human. His lips moved, and he said something silently. "Come on." Taking a deep breath, the little orc girl stood up again. Her cloak slid down again. She took a deep breath and lifted the microphone. Just like that, the children fell asleep peacefully, sighing at the sparkling sparks in the ashes, 1, 2 floating bubbles, admiring faces. The song, the sound of praising the entire fog city, began to appear in every corner of the city, like ripples of water. In the distance, a berserk orc was holding up a baby in swaddling clothes. The parents of the baby were crying bitterly under the protection of several knights. The knights couldn't do anything about it. The moment the song started, the berserk orc stopped. In the city, in a dark alley, when his companion's corpse was brutally dismembered and blood splattered all over the walls on both sides, the man could only curl up in the corner, trembling in fear. He cried bitterly, begging the huge monster in front of him to let him go. But the moment the monster raised its claws mercilessly, the monster suddenly stopped. Under the man's despairing gaze, it suddenly turned around and walked out of the alley step by step. It stood at the exit of the alley and looked up at the sky. The sky, or rather, it was a gigantic figure that seemed to be touching the night sky. Stopped? What's that sound?" The few policemen who were trapped in a street and struggling to fight without receiving any support stopped shooting at this time. They had almost used up all their ammunition. At this moment, the huge red-haired monster loosened its grip and threw the police car on the ground. Then it closed its eyes and just stood there. What happened? I don't know, but all of a sudden, I feel very at ease. The policeman carefully walked out of the bunker. Under the starlight, the huge shadow seemed to be covered with a soft veil by the moonlight. In the crowded shelter, the chaotic crowd suddenly quieted down, and the crying of children gradually stopped. In the silence, the song flowed past the people. They almost forgot their fear in an instant, only feeling as if a pair of gentle hands were hugging them. Mr. Tresty, one of the 12 knights guarding here, looked in surprise at the light figure wearing a revealing leather suit, as if it was some kind of cross-dressing performance, and he secretly sighed in relief. Did it work? Bedivere. Finally, at the end of the long street, Farrell, who seemed to be strolling leisurely, but the length of each step required Ms. which to use all her strength to catch up, suddenly stopped. What is this, the latest projection technology? This kind of dressing is really courageous. Ms. which looked up at the sky, dumbfounded. If she was the one standing there, she probably wouldn't be able to see anyone in the future. At this moment, a berserk beastman slowly walked out of shop on the side, no longer in a berserk state. This beastman's body was much stronger than the average berserk beastman. Ms. which was inwardly alarmed. This beastman was at least a champion, right? He had actually been hiding here all this time and hadn't attacked Ms. Witch and Farrell. Was it the aura released by this man that made the berserk beastman warrior instinctively feel fear and didn't dare to move even though he was berserk? But since he had appeared, Ms. Witch immediately became vigilant. "Let's go. Farrell said indifferently, ignoring the beastman warrior that had appeared and continuing to walk forward. Old man, you, Ms. which was stunned and subconsciously looked at the beastman warrior. At this moment, he didn't seem to see her and was only looking at the sky in a daze. There was no trace of berserk aura there. His soul seemed to have been purified. As a spirit witch, she could easily sense that the beastman warrior's heart had been comforted and that the song conveyed a sense of benevolence. This person, Ms. Witch looked at the huge light figure again and muttered to herself, I still feel so ashamed. Wait for me, old man. Don't leave me behind. Sir Perkins Manor. The old knight was frowning at this moment. On the screen was the scene transmitted back from a few streets in Fog City. The berserk beastmen were all in close-up at this moment. They were frozen, and the knights who went to suppress them were now easily approaching these beastmen. Caesar, what happened? The old knight frowned, but there was no trace of panic. It was as if he was just confused. It's the moon contract. Since ancient times, the beastmen have passed down that it's a sacrificial song used to worship the ancestors. Caesar looked out of the window. There were not many things in the city that could block the light figure that was dozens of meters high, so the appearance of the light figure could be seen very clearly. You, the old knight, frowned again. At this time, a pair of ugly wings on Caesar's back instantly broke through his clothes. He then broke through the window and rushed to the sky above the knight's manor. Under the moonlight, Caesar silently looked at the huge shadow in the center of the city, and there was a touch of gentleness on his face. The guidance of fate, but fate, like the moon, is fickle and alternating. Hateful life intertwines suffering and happiness. Rich and poor, they melt and disappear like ice and snow. The terrible and empty wheel of fate, you turn mercilessly. You are vicious and cruel, destroying all happiness and beautiful expectations. The shadow shrouds the blurred, and you also knock me down. The song also spread from the figure under the moonlight. Like a storm, it attacked the entire Fog City in an instant. If the song from the light figure was like a gentle drizzle, then the loud and clear sound at this time could be said to be a rapid storm. Like a sharp sword, the sharp sound directly tore through the gentleness that covered the Fog City. It was like countless shouts, awakening the most primitive bestial nature hidden in the bottom of their hearts. The beastmen, who had been silent, suddenly roared one after another, as if adding drum beats to this sharp singing god. Dong dong, dong dong, dong dong. The city seemed to play a war song. The beastmen went berserk again, more terrifying than before. They started again. The streets that had already quieted down and the major shelters seemed to explode at this moment. Because not only did the beastmen begin to go berserk, but even the ordinary people seemed to feel great pain at this moment. Pain. After the pain, it began to be irritable. It was difficult to control. Then, it was the birth of the primitive desire to destroy in their hearts. The riot in the city. Once again, it was like a storm, more violent. Clang! At this time, the microphone fell from the trembling hands, making a harsh sound. After being amplified by the spell, it suddenly turned into a huge noise that made people dizzy. The Beastman girl directly fell to the ground at this time, and her eyes were filled with horror. She hugged herself with both hands, and her body began to tremble, becoming extremely painful. It's him again. Bedivere had just fought with Oberon not long ago, and he had personally witnessed the riot in the Fog City caused by Oberon. At this moment, the high-pitched and sharp sound was made by Oberon. It was as if he was mocking them mercilessly, destroying their advantageous situation in an instant. Their communicators were constantly receiving signals from other places. Not good. The Beastmen went berserk again, and this time, they're even crazier. Request for backup. Shelter. The residents don't know why they suddenly lost control. They began to smash everything. Don't kick my brother. Madam, calm down, calm down. Looking at the one or two knights beside him, at this time, hugging their heads tightly, as if they were enduring great pain, Bedivere knew that something bad was going to happen, so he directly rushed to the stage. You, do you have any other way? Bedivere stared at the little girl who brought a glimmer of hope for victory and asked in a low voice. No, no. Lael's body trembled, and her eyes were absent-minded, so frightened. This is an ancient cry. It's a war song, the most primitive wildness. No, I can't resist. I can't resist. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. My song can't reach their hearts. I'm sorry. Bedivere gritted his teeth. What about the song just now? It can resist a little bit. At least, can it let ordinary people recover their rationality? Please. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Get away from me quickly. At this time, the Beastman girl instantly let out a mournful scream, and her hands pressed hard on her ears. Seeing this, Bedivere couldn't help but frown. Sure enough, you are also. Bedivere suddenly stood up, one hand pressed on his ear, and activated the communication device, shouting, "Answer! Headquarters! Answer! I am Bedivere. Answer!" Electric current, the sound of screaming. Is the headquarters also? Bedivere helplessly watched all this happen. Under that high-pitched song, it seemed that only a strong-willed person could withstand it. This is really more troublesome than a full-body fracture surgery. Chung Iran shook her head hard and rubbed her temples hard, as if she wanted to drive out the melody that was constantly reverberating in her mind. But Will's two bandmates were not so lucky. At this time, the two of them suddenly went berserk and were crazily fighting each other. And Will hurriedly tried to separate the two people. Not far away, Klein was also suppressing Nick, who was in the same situation. Chung Iran couldn't help but secretly worry. She didn't know how long she could resist, but why is Will okay? Although she felt strange, but at this moment, he couldn't take care of himself. Chung Iran gritted her teeth, wanting to do something. At this time, a small figure slowly walked by her side, looking up, as if absent-minded, straight at the bright moon in the sky. His eyes turned into amber color, looking quite strange. Different from the beastman's berserk, he looked very quiet, but it also didn't seem to be in a normal state. Oga! Oga! Chung Iran suddenly rushed in front of Oga, reaching out to shake his body. Wake up! Oga, wake up! He still had this absent-minded and strange look, as if he didn't hear anything. Sorry. Chung Iran gritted her teeth, raised her hand, and slapped the delicate beastman boy's face. The sound of the slap was very crisp. Oga, did you hear? Did you hear my voice? Wake up! Oga! Slap, 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 slap. A few slaps were unable to wake up the absent-minded Oga. Chung Iran gritted his teeth, resolutely took a deep breath, and put down the guitar that he had been carrying on his back. The zipper opened in an instant, and in the black bag, he put both his hands on the guitar that he had sealed for a long time. He still wasn't ready. He was ready to let his voice be transmitted to people's hearts. I don't care so much. Help me, partner. Chung Iran took a deep breath, hugging the guitar and standing in front of Oga, almost without thinking. The original scenery of his hometown. He subconsciously played the guitar version of this song, because Oga seemed to like this song very much. If it was said that the continuous battle song was like the sound of thousands of soldiers and horses on the battlefield, then the notes that flowed between Chung Iran's fingers were like the murderous, murderous whispers that drowned the sky. Without plugging in the amplifier, the sound of the guitar wasn't too loud. If one wasn't careful, as long as one stood a little further away, the sound of the guitar would be lost. Oga, wake up. Chung Iran closed his eyes, wholeheartedly immersing himself in the artistic conception of this song. The sound was weak, but it was like plucking the softest string in one's heart. Although it was weak, it clearly appeared in everyone's ears, even if it was only in the surroundings of the spell, the ears of the knights and magicians here. But it was like a clear spring flowing past, and the tinkling sound seemed to let people see their hometown. The irritation in their hearts instantly faded away. Ms. Maria looked at the human male who was playing the guitar with some surprise, as if she couldn't believe it. Although she didn't lose her mind because of the song, she still couldn't help but feel a little uncomfortable, but now she was much more comfortable. Will's partner also began to wake up. Mr. Nick waved his hand, signaling Klein to stop pressing on his body. On the stage, the orc girl slowly put down her hands, feeling a little lost. Although the battle song was still playing in the air, the sound of the guitar was like a gentle barrier wrapping around her. Boss Luo, who was in the form of a small rock, suddenly smiled, looking at the young man who crossed the ocean to study in this country with a gratified look. No, you are already prepared. It's so beautiful. Well, what's wrong with me? Oga's absent-minded eyes gradually became clear. His lips moved slightly, but what he saw was Chung Yiran standing in front of him. Then he held his cheeks with both hands. It hurts a little, although he didn't understand Oga's words. Chung Yiran still understood the meaning of this gesture. He laughed dryly, then took a deep breath, took out his phone, and played a short video in front of Oga. This is? Oga was a little confused. I know you are very talented. Chung Yiran took a deep breath, using the phone to translate his own language. You can memorize it after listening to it once, right? You have already mastered the way to play the guitar. Next, you play it. Me? I can't. How can I? Chung Yiran didn't care about Oga's fear at this time. Forcibly stuffed the guitar in his hand into Oga's arms. Use it to play. I will help you at the side. This is a temporary song I composed for Moon Contract. It may not be perfect, but at least you have to try. Use your strength to help your sister. Remember, play with your heart. Only this way, you can transmit your voice and feelings to everyone's heart. Use music. I can't. He looked at the stage in horror. Chung Yiran shouted at this time. Even if you can't, you have to play. Otherwise, I will dress you up as a girl and throw you into the bar with the most perverts in Wu City. They will definitely not care whether you are a man or a woman. Huh, that's it. Chung Yiran hammered the hammer, pushing Oga to the stage of the truck, and conveniently picked up a spare guitar. Although I don't know what you're going to do, but I feel so cool. How can this kind of thing be left out of me? On the way, his companions directly rushed over. I always feel so uncomfortable. This kind of noise. Well, you guys, when it comes to playing the guitar, I have never been afraid of anyone. Then, let's do it again. Mr. Bedivere, they are here? Mr. Bedivere frowned, looking at this group of people rushing to the stage, muttering just now, you have also experienced it. This group of people may have some methods. Let's give it a try. Anyway, the magic power of the technique is still very sufficient. It was unusually sufficient. You guys, in front of the stage, the orc girl who had regained consciousness looked at the guys who came up one by one. Not only Chung Yiran, Will, and the other two, but even her brother Oga was also the same. But why were these people dressed like him? Even if they didn't expose themselves, it was fine. I don't know. This was found in the truck, as if it was specially prepared for us. But this is not bad. Her companion directly moved the drum stand, sat on it, and then played a solo, making the drum sound rush to the sky like a shower. Come on. Chung Yiran just connected an ordinary electric guitar and casually played it. After getting the feeling, she looked at everyone and smiled. Let's have a concert that belongs to us, with this city as the stage. Above the sky, huge lights and shadows appeared one after another. The huge Lael, the huge Oga, the huge Will and his companions, and the huge Chung Yiran. Come on. Boss Luo was holding a light stick in his hand at this time, gently waving it. Hashtag, 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 hashtag PS. The next chapter will be later. Baidu, search it one Chinese website. No advertising message. Chapter 13-14. First, there was a rapid drumbeat, followed by a 10-second solo where Will temporarily took over as Bess's guitarist. The sound was amplified by the compound technique and suddenly broke through the blockade of the battle song. Above the city, the temporary orchestra formed by 6 huge lights and shadows stood in their respective positions. On the stage, Oga also played the first note as the lead guitarist under the encouraging gazes of the crowd. Oga has never played with us before. He's still a novice, but you guys shouldn't have a problem, right? Chung Yiran looked at Will and the other two. The three of them directly gave her a thumbs up. But it's not punk rock. It's really a bit unpleasant. Hey, we can all hear you. Pay attention to your image. Oh, are you all looking at me? Everyone, this group of people, is there really no problem Bedivere subconsciously rubbed his eyebrows. He always had the feeling of looking at rookies who came to the hospital for an internship and walked directly to the operating table. He smiled bitterly, self-deprecating. In the end, I actually have to rely on these ordinary guys as the 12 Knights. I'm really a failure. Self-deprecating was self-deprecating, but this kind of gambling behavior inevitably made the usually calm Knight Bedivere nervous. A melody that was not very familiar, but gradually became better, sounded from the guitar in Oga's hand. He didn't know if it was an illusion or because of the amplification of the sound by the compound technique. He always felt that this sound was directly transmitted to his heart. Bedivere's tightly knitted eyebrows began to slowly relax, and even unknowingly, his whole person was immersed in this sound. It seemed to have some kind of inconceivable magical power. If at the beginning, Changyaran only made people calm, then now, the moment the sound sounded, it was as if they were already in the wilderness of their hometown. The wind gently blew on the water, the green grass like a cushion. The waves of the grass flowed into the distance. And then, the girl's singing voice sounded again in their hearts. But the high-pitched singing voice was still there, and as if it had turned into a bigger storm, it attacked again. But this time, it seemed to be different, and the singing voice also went over the battle song, once again sneaking into people's hearts, as if something was selectively filtered out, even if the battle song still existed. What people heard was this temporary band's performance. Singing, under the moonlight, Caesar's war song did not stop. Instead, it was pushed to the brink of infuriation. If it went one step further, even he himself would fall into a berserk state. His gaze was piercingly cold. Looking at the 6 huge figures in the city, he slowly became silent. He knew that even if he continued to push the battle song, the result would not change. When the people in the city all quieted down and looked at everything around them, when the berserk orcs released their berserk state and returned to their original appearance, Caesar gave up on resisting them the instant they fell to the ground in exhaustion. The beast-man who had lost his consciousness could no longer hear anything. There was no point in continuing to bewitch him at this point. After taking a deep look at 2 of the shadows, Caesar slowly let out a sigh of relief and slowly descended. Why don't you continue? The old knight saw everything and walked out with a frown. There's no need, Caesar said indifferently. We've done almost everything that needs to be done. Now, we're just waiting for the harvest. Now, even if the city is rioting or quiet, it doesn't have any effect on us. There's no need to waste time here. The old knight nodded. A quarter of an hour later, the owner of Sir Perkins Manor had vanished without a trace. When a team went out on a mission to bring back some orcs who had not escaped but had now returned to their human form, all they saw was a bloody manor. Even the 12 Geraint knights, who had exhausted their strength and were temporarily resting, lost their heads and fell on the sofa in the lounge forever. Death. Fear suddenly came. Reporting. All suppression points have been successfully suppressed. Reporting. The riots in the shelter and evacuation points have also subsided. Good news came one after another from the communicator in Bedivere's ear. He was really relieved. Then he smiled and looked at the people who were playing and singing desperately on the stage. Tactical music group? Bedivere suddenly thought of whether the Knight mechanism could also use this as a project to create another kind of execution force. Although the orc uprising had been quelled this time, there might be an even bigger orc disaster in the future. If possible, this kind of tactical concert could be deployed on that kind of battlefield. It should be able to shine brilliantly, right? Did it succeed? It seems calmed down. Finally, under Bedivere's reminder, everyone put down their sore arms and then sat on the ground. I want to smoke a cigarette to calm down. This was more tiring than holding a small bar concert. It was just singing a song. There are still minors. Pay attention. Yes. Then looking at the words of these unreliable guys on the stage, Mr. Bedivere quickly dismissed the idea in his mind. Then he listened to the good news that was obviously much more pleasant to hear. But the next moment, Bedivere's face changed dramatically. What did you say? Say it again. In other words, it was not an exaggeration to say that he was stunned for a moment. It's true. I don't know how to say it. They're all dead, except for the two cabinet elders who were in charge of the evacuation. The rest are all dead. Mr. Geraint is also. We found his body. Dead. All dead. Sir Hopkins is also missing. Maybe he was taken away. His hand suddenly dropped from the communicator in his ear. Dr. Bediviere's lips seemed to have become pale. Looking at Chung Aran, Will, and the others who were still happily chatting on the stage, he suddenly felt unreal. His home was stolen just like that, and it was an extremely tragic loss. Sir Bedivere, what happened? Everyone looked at the calm knight. It seemed that something was wrong, so they quickly came forward as if they were waiting for him to say something to celebrate. Their faces still had the loose smile of victory. Every one of them appeared in front of Bedivere, making him feel dizzy. Mr. Bedivere, what's the matter? Cly came over at this time. Nothing. Bedivere took a deep breath and said, I'm just thinking about how to clean up the problem next. Clean up? Klein was startled. But after the riot subsided, the whole city seemed to have experienced a baptism of war. The formerly bustling streets were full of shocking scars. He couldn't help but be silent. Sure enough, he was still too far behind. Because of this little victory, he was complacent. But Bedivere had already begun to consider the problem after the disaster. He was indeed worthy of being the successor of the Knights of the Round Table. He still needed to continue to work hard. No matter what, you should first clean up the things here, and then go to the Birmingham Knight Division Elders' place to meet them. I'll leave this place to you. I'll go first to see the situation in other areas. Don't worry, Sir Bedivere will do a good job. No, at least for the time being, he couldn't let this bad news spread among the middle and lower level knights, at least not now. Bedivere quickly left with a heavy heart. He believed that the Knight Division Elder, who was still active and escaped the disaster because he went out, should also do the same countermeasures. Hopefully. It seemed that this group of magicians had nothing to do for now. Ms. Maria was anxiously looking for something at the scene. She walked back and forth in the crowd and kept muttering, Strange. Why did he suddenly disappear? He should have been beside me. Did he run away? Ms. Maria, who felt like she had done a losing business, thought of the exploded secret crystal and suddenly felt like her heart was bleeding. Her so-called business was not good recently was not a lie, but it was true. But of course, it was not true that she had not bought new underwear for half a year. It was just that she had a bad character of loving money as much as her own life. Even the middle and low-level knights were not clear about what had happened in Sir Perkins Manor, let alone these folk magicians who had been temporarily conscripted. So Bedivere's sudden departure did not attract the attention of the crowd. After all, there were too many reasons that could be explained. Naturally, no one would associate the dignified British Knight Division of Fog being destroyed. Did he really run away? Ms. Maria felt like crying. Sure enough, the gentle and healing magician was a lie. Was he originally a guy who specialized in deceiving old, mature women, cheating money and sex? My ultra-pure secret crystal. 2 teardrops almost fell out and collided with each other. Ms. Maria, are you looking for me? At this moment, such a voice sounded beside her. Ms. Maria was stunned for a moment, then turned around and saw the young freelance magician in front of her. She put on a bright smile. I knew it. You won't leave me alone. Perhaps she was too excited, so she wanted to give him a good hug without saying anything. Boss Luo took a step back easily, the instinctive reaction to avoid Ren Xiling's hug, which made the witch miss the opportunity to hug him. Ms. Maria, who missed the hug, felt a little wronged. Fortunately, she did not fall down on the ground, but she still looked over with dissatisfaction. I was just a little thirsty, so I went to get some water to drink. Sorry to make you worry. Luaccio smiled. This is for you. There is also a box of prepared mineral water on the truck. Oh, I see. Ms. Maria hurriedly nodded and took the water. Then, she quickly fell under the healing smile again. The person you are waiting for should be back soon. Please wait a little longer, Luaccio continued. It's okay. Ms. Maria suddenly said, If you don't mind, you can come to my magic house and have a seat. Anyway, let the people from the Knight's mechanism take care of the following things. I still have something to do. Luaccio said softly. I may not be able to go. In the Palace of Westminster, in the room where Lancelot was imprisoned, Lancelot successfully unlocked the lock of Catherine's chain with an iron wire in her mouth. There seemed to be some commotion outside, but it seemed to have calmed down. Lancelot heard two completely different voices fighting, and her spirit seemed to be a little sluggish. But as the two voices stopped, she now recovered a little. But unfortunately, the lock made of hamstone was a special magic structure and obviously could not be unlocked by an iron wire. So, she only recovered part of her ability to move, but it was not a problem to leave the room. The corridor was empty. Lancelot had been to the Palace of Westminster more than once or twice. As the Queen's bodyguard, she had been to this place many times and knew the terrain like the back of her hand. But she could not directly know where the Queen was imprisoned by the people of the myth of Doomsday. Lancelot had two choices in front of her. First, escape from here, and then send the message to the Knight's mechanism and wait for backup. The second option was to rescue Her Majesty the Queen, who was a hostage. She quickly gave up on the second idea. Not to mention now that the holy armor was taken away. Even if the holy armor was still there, Catherine's holy armor had the weakness of restraining it. Moreover, there were several other key members of the myth of Doomsday. Such a reckless rescue may not be like the protagonist of a lonely hero movie who won in the end. Your Majesty, wait for me to come back. Taking a deep breath, Lancelot looked for the nearest exit and left. Fortunately, perhaps because she was sure that she could not escape, there was no one guarding here, except for the guard in the Palace of Westminster who had been knocked down on the ground. The exit was just ahead, but all of a sudden, a warm current began to rise from her abdomen. Like a burning flame, it instantly rushed to her head, and everything in front of her began to turn into a series of illusions. Lancelot immediately lost her sense of balance and leaned against the wall of the corridor. She felt as if there were countless bugs crawling all over her body. Furthermore, a large amount of heat was emitted from her body, causing her to begin to sweat profusely. Her eyes had become blurred, and she panted and sat on the ground weakly. He didn't know when the feeling of the worm drilling into his body disappeared, but what followed was the feeling of being at a loss, as if all his sensitive spots had been infinitely magnified. Sweat flowed out, soaking the white shirt under her tuxedo. The wet shirt material made her skin faintly visible. How could it be? Lancelot's breathing started to become heavier and heavier. His trembling hands couldn't help but slowly touch his own body. Can't do this. She tried her best to resist the primitive reaction of her body, but she couldn't resist the wild excitement that came when her fingertips gently touched her private parts. Am I going to fall? It's really unsightly. When Lancelot heard this voice in her half-awake state, she only felt that there seemed to be someone standing in front of her. A maid in black and white. Long hair as bright as gold, deep blue eyes. The moment their eyes met, the voice sounded again. Can you be considered a lady like this? Duchess of Aquitaine, Eleanor. P.S. 11/30 Oars. Chapter 13:15. In a quiet corridor, the sound of panting became heavier and heavier. It was as if one could see the mist exhaling from the thin lips. Lancelot instinctively resisted the voice that came to her ears at this time. In the haze, she couldn't see the other person's appearance clearly, although the appearance had been imprinted in her mind long ago. What did she say? Aquitaines? Eleanor? There was a very familiar feeling, which quietly crossed her mind when the sensitivity and excitement of the whole body were about to drown her reason. Then a new round of pleasure directly drowned it. Master said, since this is your life during the vacation, no matter what you encounter, we won't give you any help. So, the things in your body, you have to force them out by yourself. Or you plan to just give in. He could no longer hear anything. There was only an endless sound that surged in like a tide. Lancelot's entire body was bent. His knees were on the ground, and his head was touching the floor. Her body was constantly trembling. Then a dull humming sound was heard. When she raised her head again, she found that her eyes were slightly sober. At the same time, her lips were stained with blood, and her arm that had been bitten At the last moment, when she was about to completely lose her reason, she chose to use the method of biting her arm to stimulate her mind with pain. This method was not advisable, but obviously the effect was immediate. "Here, Queen, signal." In an extremely sober state, Lancelot said a few words with difficulty. Maybe it was just a subconscious behavior. When her endurance exceeded the limit, and she said these words, she directly fell to the ground. The servant girl squatted down, stretched out her hand to tidy up Lancelot's scattered hair, and whispered, "What makes you not want to wake up? Even if it's not the end of the vacation." "Queen, support." She could still vaguely hear the voice coming from her lips when she was in a coma. In the early morning of June 2nd, 1940, in the port city in the northeast of France on the coastline, which was also known as the Church on the Dune, what he could see was the army that was slowly advancing like ants with low morale. They had consumed too much physical strength and fighting spirit in the past few days. Behind them, the tanks and chariots of the Imperialists were like ferocious tigers. "We won't be able to hold on for long. Is there any hope? This retreat, I really want to go home. If I can't go back, please return my belongings to my hometown, my brother." Fallen people, along the way, fallen people could be seen everywhere. It was as if the figures had crawled out of the mud. They were like old people who were walking at sunset, bending their backs as they walked. Their eyes were filled with confusion and fear. They should be trying to pull themselves together, but both their minds and bodies seemed to have reached their limits. Finally, another soldier fell on the road. In the crowd, she quickly ran to the soldier's side and anxiously shouted, "Soldier, soldier, wake up, Ching." Her words did not last long. The other soldiers seemed to have known the outcome, so they moved forward silently. "Let's go take his tag." "Forgive me, I really don't have the strength to carry his body, nurse." A veteran stopped beside her for a moment and patted her on the shoulder. No one knew the real identity of this nurse who was covered in mud. Who would know that such a little nurse with such a terrible appearance would be the princess of their country? In the end, the veteran pulled the military tag off the corpse. He shook his head and followed the team in front of him. She was the only one who held the body that was still warm and seemed to still have a heartbeat. The soldiers around her lowered their heads and walked past silently, because time was really tight. "Who are you crying for? Yourself or them, Elizabeth?" When she looked up, she saw a pair of blue eyes. She was not in a bad state like them. Even if she was wearing a military uniform, she was as clean as usual. Elizabeth didn't know how she did it. This homeroom had always been so mysterious, appearing and disappearing like a ghost. Even if she walked with the army, it seemed that except for herself, no one knew of her existence. She was like a ghost. She should have been saved and shouldn't have been abandoned halfway like this. They were the same, but why did they have to go through such a war? Why not go through war? The girl looked up in disbelief, and her voice trembled. "Teacher, do you think war is right?" She said, "Do you think it's wrong?" But it also promotes the development of civilization. It's because of the desire to invade that human beings force themselves to become stronger and stronger. Without these desires, the humans on this land might still be children living in the Garden of Eden, and there wouldn't be so many brilliant civilizations today. Blood is the soil to plant the flowers of civilization. I should have taught you that. The young girl sorrowfully looked back at the path of retreat, the corpses that had fallen, and the bad news that had been continuously coming from the past few days flooded in. Only, the princess who had just lost her childishness had tears in her eyes. She was as helpless as a bird that had lost its wings and was falling off a cliff. "Are you hating yourself for being weak, Elizabeth?" Holding the body that was gradually losing its temperature, the young princess bit her lips tightly. The answer revealed in her eyes was already obvious. "But I can't change anything by myself, no matter how hard I try. Really, there's no way." But she quickly recognized the reality. She was no longer the little girl in the warm castle who wanted to learn horsemanship, strategy, and fencing to participate in the war. After a year of experience, she had already tasted the cruelty of all kinds of wars. She clearly realized how small human strength was in the face of collective and war. Even if it's just one person, he can change everything. When the blue eyes looked at the young princess, she even felt like she was lost in the sea. She would never forget the voice, appearance, and gaze of the other party at this time. Even if it's just one person, when you become the king. Become the king. She stretched out her hand to her, and she subconsciously put her hand in her palm. She only heard her whisper, "You will be crowned king." Year 53, the 2nd day of June. Britain, Westminster Abbey, Westminster Abbey. The palace maids and guards, as well as the police of the Fog City, had to look for traces of that big shot in this royal church. In less than half an hour, the most important ceremony would begin. However, they didn't know where that person went. Everyone's anxiety was already written on their faces. She saw all of this in her eyes, standing on the top of the tower, looking down. She was no longer a young girl, nor a girl. After more than 10 years of unimaginable experience, she would finally be crowned king in this church. Didn't come, teacher? At this time, the future queen was holding a book with some damaged corners in her hands, a French version of Confession. She took one last look at the entrance of the church, and then slowly walked down. She didn't know when, but that mysterious homeschool had disappeared from her life. Her life had disappeared, but in the years of teaching, she had left behind too many memories. You will be crowned king. In that day, this sentence would be with her for the rest of her life. 13 years later, Princess Elizabeth came to the door of the auditorium for the coronation ceremony. The people inside slowly opened the door for the well-dressed future queen. She looked inside, but the light shone from inside. She only saw a blank space. Creak, yeah. The sound of the door opening suddenly startled Her Majesty. She was taking a nap and was sitting on a corner of the sofa. There was a tattered book on her lap. At the moment of waking up, Her Majesty saw Miss Maid open the door. Her Majesty was startled at first, then showed a smile. She didn't stand up. She sat up quietly, with an impeccable sitting posture. I just had a dream. Her Majesty whispered, "It's a little long dream. Do you still like to daydream, Elizabeth?" Miss Maid also walked slowly into the room with an impeccable smile and an impeccable posture. Of course, if she didn't grab the back of Lancelot's collar at this time, it would be really impeccable if she dragged her in like this. What happened to this child? Her Majesty glanced at her and asked curiously. Probably her self-esteem doesn't allow her to do something shameful, so she chose to be unconscious. Yi said indifferently, "This is a strong child." Her Majesty showed a kind look. Miss Maid casually threw Lancelot on the ground. Her Majesty couldn't help but open her mouth slightly, and finally said with a wry smile, "She hasn't changed at all, teacher." Yi looked around and said, "It seems that as a hostage, your situation isn't too bad." It wasn't like the stone room in the monastery at the beginning. In this building of the British Parliament, there probably wasn't a place with such bad conditions, right? Strictly speaking, this was a place like a study. It was the place where the Queen used to rest when she came to the Parliament. Probably to understand a harmless old woman like me. The Queen smiled, and then slowly stood up. "Do you want some tea? I made some black tea. Do you still have this book?" Miss Maid looked at the Queen, who was carefully putting the book away. Her Majesty looked down at Confession and smiled. "Occasionally, I open it and read it. After all, it brought me a lot of painful memories." The Queen quickly raised her head, no longer talking about the book, but asked curiously, "I don't see your male companion. He's now experiencing something that can make him happy." Miss Maid said softly. Her Majesty opened her mouth and looked at her blankly. After a while, the Queen's eyes became soft. "Teacher, you also have such a gentle side. What a lucky man. I suddenly feel jealous. So, I don't plan to waste too much time on you." Miss Maid said indifferently, "Now tell me. You called me with the black card. What's the matter?" The Queen slowly came to the tea table, making tea, and said casually, "We didn't have much time to talk in the theater. I think your male companion is also a tolerant person, so he should be willing to leave this time to me. Do you want some sugar?" Miss Maid narrowed her eyes. Little Elizabeth seems to have grown into a bad woman. "Then I'll put one in. I remember you only add one at a time." The Queen smiled and served the black tea, and then asked abruptly, "Teacher, The reason why you came to teach me is that my father made a deal with you, right? Generally speaking, we'll keep the information of the customer's transactions confidential. Miss Maid sat down slowly, picked up the teacup, and took a sip. Well, your tea-making skills have improved. Anyway, it's been 60 years. Teacher, the Queen murmured. It's just the time for this cup of tea, Miss Maid said abruptly. The Queen smiled bitterly. You're still as ruthless? There's indeed something I want you to do. Look at my situation now. At this moment, the sound of light footsteps came from outside the room. Then someone knocked on the door. A bulletproof car slowly stopped in front of the gate of the Palace of Westminster. A man in his 30s in a military uniform came out of the driver's seat and opened the back door. Sir Hopkins walked out slowly. Caesar also came out of the other side of the door. Thank you, often, my child, the old knight said with a smile. This was the officer who followed the Prime Minister as the commander of the Vienna base. He was the adopted son of the old knight. The old knight looked up at the Parliament in front of him and suddenly said, Actually, I don't like this place very much. As he spoke, he slowly walked up the stairs leading to the top. At the same time, Often followed the old knight with 2 wooden boxes in her arms. Caesar looked at Sir Hopkins, who was halfway up the stairs expressionlessly, and suddenly said, Hopkins, do you still remember your promise? The knight turned around and smiled. Of course, my uncle. How could I betray the covenant between us? Don't worry, the next activation of the Holy Grail will fulfill your wish. Caesar didn't say anything and just followed him silently. The old knight seemed to have recovered a little, and his pace became faster. At this moment, a figure appeared at the end of the stairs. He was kneeling on the ground with one knee. His face was pale, as if he had suffered a serious injury. The wounds on his body could even be seen clearly. Oh, Simpton. The knight stopped and said, You're back too. I know you won't let me down. I met a strange person. His strength was terrifying. I couldn't even take one hit from him. Simpton lowered his head. His voice was flat as he raised the magic sword in his hands. The old knight frowned. He seemed to have thought of something from this simple description. He let Often take the magic sword and then reached out to help Simpton up. Don't worry, my knight. I will give you more power. Soon. Come with me. He walked past Simpton and walked forward. After a few steps, he found that Simpton was still standing there. The old knight turned around and smiled. He waved his hand. Come, don't stop. Hashtag PS. Actually, I wanted to update earlier, but there was a power outage. Fortunately, this chapter didn't lose much. Otherwise, I would have given up sleeping. Chapter 13:16. The figure was running quickly in the street. Even though he was moving at high speed, Bedivere was still communicating with the 2 pavilion elders who were still unharmed and hurriedly discussing what happened. But he quickly stopped because he sensed a large number of active magic power sources. Even more directly, he saw a group of guys in black robes with their faces covered. They were walking quickly at this time. Bedivere naturally couldn't turn a blind eye to such a strange lineup. He directly swept in front of these guys and blocked their way. Stop! I have something to ask you. Among the group of black-cloaked people, one person slowly walked out at this time. This person slowly lifted the hat on his head in front of Knight Bedivere. Bedivere opened his mouth slightly at this time and said in astonishment, It's you, Gareth? Who are you? It's a bit long. Mr. Gareth said seriously. Come with me. I'll tell you on the way. Where are we going? Bedivere frowned suddenly. A tragedy had just happened in the headquarters of the Knights of Fog, but Gareth was now. This made him vigilant. I know you must be suspecting me, but Gareth smiled bitterly. Just like when I first heard it, I found it hard to imagine and even believe. Who are they? Bedivere frowned again. I'm Ace, one of the 4 deacons of the Secretary Tower of the Magician Association. The man with a bird of light on his shoulder said slowly. The Magician Association. Bedivere opened his mouth in surprise, then pondered for a moment before looking at Gareth. You. Where are you going to take me? Let's talk on the way. In the end, they still walked into the church. When the door opened, Her Majesty the Queen in shackles could be seen. She was watched by Catherine, sitting in a chair and waiting. On the other hand, Lancelot was paralyzed on the ground, motionless. What happened? Caesar asked with a frown. This old woman doesn't seem to be honest. To be honest, I've long said that she shouldn't be treated too well. Catherine shrugged and pointed at Lancelot on the ground. As for this female knight, she probably had too much willpower. I don't know what method she used to escape. In the end, she couldn't hold on any longer and collapsed at the old woman's resting place. In fact, I have long advised against keeping it. Caesar didn't say anything. Seeing that their leader didn't say anything, the Doomsday Corps members naturally didn't continue the topic. At this moment, Her Majesty looked at a relief sculpture in front of the podium in the auditorium. She slowly stood up with her back to Hopkins and the others and suddenly said, "Hopkins, I don't like this place. Can we go somewhere else? Here, there are memories of most of the important moments you have experienced in your life. I think it will be more appropriate when your life ends here." The old knight smiled. "My queen." The queen sighed slowly, turned around, and said with a frown, "In fact, I don't understand why it's you, Hopkins. You are the descendant of the noble King Arthur, the commander of the Knights of Fog. You have already stood at the top of the pyramid of inhuman power in Britain. What else is there to be unsatisfied with? Human beings can only progress if their needs are not satisfied. I've always thought." He walked slowly and came to the front of Her Majesty the Queen. "Human beings shouldn't stop in their tracks. What are you pursuing?" Her Majesty the Queen looked straight into his eyes. "I see it again. This is the Queen's gaze I am familiar with." The old knight seemed to be fascinated by this pair of eyes and whispered, "Elizabeth, what do you think is the source of motivation for people to move forward?" "Greed, as greedy as you," Her Majesty the Queen said sarcastically. The old knight just smiled. "In fact, you are right. The things you said I have. Over the years, I have been asking myself, what else do I need? But in the end, no matter how many nights I thought about it, I didn't have an answer. Suddenly one day, I found the answer. I think what I need is power. You can already command the Knights of Fog. This is your power." "No, it's not that. It shouldn't be just that." Hopkins sighed, and his cloudy eyes suddenly burst out with light. "It's my own power. There is one thing I still don't understand. Since I have the blood of King Arthur, why can't I get the inhuman power? Why can't I become extraordinary? My strong physique, my youth, all these wonderful things are fading away bit by bit as I age. I am also getting old." The Queen shook her head. "So next, I will even replace you." A smile appeared on the old knight's face, and he whispered, "If you were still young and beautiful, that would be great. But it doesn't matter. You will see the moment when I am crowned king, not a king without real power like you are now, but a real king." The Queen was silent and seemed to be a little sad. She just sighed. Sir Hopkins smiled and said, "Elizabeth, I know the reason why you are still calm. You probably think that the reinforcements of the Magician Association should be here soon, or even have already arrived, right?" The Queen's expression changed slightly, but then she quickly covered it up. "I am just an old woman who is being played in the palm of your hand. Every day, I am either playing with my pet or appearing in front of the camera under your arrangement. It doesn't matter if you don't admit it. Even if they come, it doesn't matter." Sir Hopkins waved his hand. "All of this will be over soon. Okay, it's about time." As he said that, Sir Hopkins slowly stepped back and opened his arms as if he was giving a hug. Ophon walked past him with the things in her hands, walked to the stage of the auditorium, and put down the things in her hands one by one. However, at this moment, creak ya, the sound of the door opening. At this moment, the sound was heard, and at the moment when the door was opened, a skinny man in a white suit stood there expressionlessly. Farrell. Then, behind him, Miswich was panting and sweating profusely. The moment he appeared, Knight Simpson didn't hesitate or think, and directly rushed up. His speed was so fast that only a shadow could be seen flashing. But Farrell waved his hand casually as if he was swatting a fly, and with a loud sound, Knight Simpson was directly slapped into the wall at the side. A mouthful of blood was directly spat out from his mouth. Just like that, he fainted. Caesar frowned, and at the same time, he narrowed his eyes. Behind him, the people from the myth of Doomsday walked up. "You are." Sir Hopkins was slightly surprised, and then he seemed to remember something, and then he said seriously, The person Simpson met, was it you? Farrell. I seem to have heard something not good. Farrell was silent for a moment. The blood of the king seems to have become dirty in your body. The old knight's expression suddenly became a bit unnatural, and then he said indifferently, I think you don't have to stop me. After all, you were once determined to protect this country, this land, and not to serve anyone, right? That's why I've always hated the system of knights. Farrell shook his head. Bloodline, hereditary. The blood of the king, to me, is nothing. Actually, if you can convince me, anyone can. Then, Sir Hopkins nodded, and then he said, Caesar. Without any hesitation, a purple-black light flashed from Caesar's body, and then the inheritance of the 12 knights appeared. You? Farrell seemed to be surprised by this situation, and he couldn't help but frown. Because they had fought before, Lancelot should be a woman. Of course, when he came in, he noticed Lancelot lying on the ground. While he was stunned, Caesar had already made his move. Indestructible lake light. Instantly chopped down, but at this time, Farrell moved like lightning and caught the sharp sword with 2 fingers. Your speed is not bad. Much better than those few brats I met before. Farrell nodded. You should have reached the 3rd stage of attire in half a day. Very good. I've decided you are the real Lancelot of this generation. But if you want to deal with me, you are still a bit lacking. It's just not bad. Caesar suddenly replied. Farrell was startled, and then he saw that blood had already started to flow out from between his fingers that caught the sword. His palm had obviously been cut open by the wind of the sword. After this attack, Caesar quickly retreated, and then he regained his composure. At the same time, he was inwardly shocked because the result of this sneak attack was so little that it made people despair. At this time, after Farrell glanced at the wound on his palm, he suddenly seemed to have changed into a different person, and a huge murderous intent was emitted from his body. That surging power that almost made people despair. His thin face suddenly revealed a sinister smile, as if he was an evil spirit that had walked out of hell. Very good. This kind of combat power is worthy of the 12 knights. Under that huge and terrifying pressure, everyone couldn't help but retreat. Her Majesty the Queen, as an ordinary person, directly slumped on the chair, and her expression changed several times. Then, let me test where your limit is. You must satisfy me. Farrell stretched out his right hand, and a black light sword condensed just like that. It wasn't a forged weapon, but a sword blade condensed from power. He walked over step by step, and the pressure increased exponentially. The chairs and tables in the auditorium directly exploded because they couldn't bear it. Caesar couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat, but at this time, 2 cold lights suddenly shot from above Farrell. Farrell didn't even look, and the black light sword in his hand seemed to flash, and the 2 cold lights were directly broken, falling to the ground, and surprisingly, they were 2 broken, flying knives. At the dome of the auditorium, a figure wearing a yellow holy armor and looking at people with a smiling face could be seen at this time. The clown, Dargoni. Dargoni, you're here too. Sir Hopkins didn't seem to be surprised, and just nodded at Mr. Clown. Mr. Clown casually threw out a ball to Sir Hopkins, and then said with a smile, It took some time to deal with Geraint, so I came late. I gave you the old man. Everything in the headquarters of the Knights of Fog, including a round table member and several cabinet elders. It was the ball that Alfin reached out and took. Next, yesterday was really, thank you for taking care of me. The moment the ball was thrown out, the clown rushed out in an instant like a ghost. I was still thinking, when can I see Mr. Farrell again? I didn't expect that it would come so soon. It's really a happy reunion. A clown is a clown, no matter which generation it is. It's always like this. Farrell sneered and directly punched out. The fist collided with the fist. A huge wave of air directly exploded at this moment. The Royal Auditorium couldn't withstand this huge force at this moment, and the dome was instantly broken. In the splashing of broken stones, the clown's crazy laughter could be heard. You're really the strongest knight in history. Even without wearing the holy armor, you're still so terrifying. So good. Come again, Mr. Farrell. Ha 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 ha. The crazy punches bombarded. The strong wind brought about by each punch destroyed everything that was left behind. The royal hall, which was already in a precarious situation, directly collapsed with a loud rumble at this moment. At this time, several figures directly rushed up. Caesar with the indestructible lake light, the people from Myth of Doomsday, and the clown. And they were facing the strongest knight in history, who could only use 15% of his strength. The Palace of Westminster, which had a long history, was turned into ruins in less than half a minute. The old knight, who was only an ordinary person, couldn't recognize this battle with his body. But this didn't stop him from being obsessed with this power. Ulfin, my child, do you see this? This is the power I want. Let's start. Why should we waste the time they bought for us? Ulfin nodded. Although the auditorium directly collapsed, it didn't hurt him or Hopkins. But Simpton was already buried under the rocks. At this time, Ulfin quickly took out the 2 boxes that he carried with him, which contained an ancient crown and the Holy Grail. Sir Hopkins came in front of the Holy Grail and opened his hands. All these years, I secretly collected the souls of non-human criminals. Sir Hopkins took off a ring on his finger and directly threw it into the Holy Grail. The blood of the orcs. He then raised a magic sword and let the blood drip into the Holy Grail. The noble souls of the loyal knights. Then, the ball sent by the clown was also put into the Holy Grail. Finally, Sir Hopkins raised the Holy Grail up high with an excited expression. And all the souls that died in the Fog City today, I will use them all as sacrifices. You will fulfill my wish. Looking at the night sky, Farrell, who used absolute power to easily suppress the people from Myth of Doomsday and the clown, Sir Hopkins shouted, "Who will give me the same power and powerful body as him? You will give me the holy armor of Mordred. Powerful, unbelievably powerful. The legend of Farrell, the terrifying legend that almost destroyed the knight's mechanism in one night. The rebellious power of Mordred. How powerful was it? The moment he held the Holy Grail with both hands, it was as if there were countless voices in Hopkins' mind, like the whispers of demons tempting humans. The most primitive desire in his heart was aroused in an instant. After several rounds of sacrifices, the Holy Grail started to emit a strong light. Not a bright white light, but a strange black light. However, he was just as dazzling. A black radiance burst forth in an instant. As the black radiance flickered, Farrell suddenly stopped. The moment he stopped, Caesar and the others who were besieging him didn't hesitate at all. Everyone and their weapons fell on Farrell's body almost at the same time. Even Mr. Clown's fist, which was covered in the Holy Grail, directly hit Farrell's head. All the power hit Farrell's body, but there was no rebound. His body withstood the attacks just like that. But he still stood in the same place in a daze, motionless. Caesar suddenly waved his hand at this time, and the people of mythology of Doomsday instantly moved away. Only Mr. Clown seemed to have found something fun, and his fist kept bombarding Farrell's chest. Can't break. Can't break. What kind of monster-level body is this? Why can't I break it? Mr. Clown's smiling face had long turned into a crying face under the exploding fists that were like bullets. Every punch landed solidly on Farrell's body, but Farrell didn't react at all and just stood there stupidly. Finally, Farrell raised his head and looked at the black light rising from the sky. They're back, they're back, they're back, they're back. They're back. I said, they're not all dead, they'll come back. I said it. You didn't believe me. You didn't believe me, His body actually started to tremble. Just a few seconds ago, Farrell had been so powerful that he made everyone feel despair. But now, he was like a madman as he faced the black pillar of light and let out a panicked shout. Hashtag, 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 hashtag PS. 12/30ths? Chapter 13:17. They're back. At this moment, Farrell's whole body suddenly trembled. Then he hugged his head and squatted down. No matter how Clown's fists bombarded his body, he didn't seem to feel any pain. Finally, Clown gave up attacking this guy. They're back. Suddenly, Farrell stood up, and a violent aura emanated from his body like a tornado. While he was still in shock, he had already crossed the distance and appeared in front of Clown in a flash. Clown's superhuman senses couldn't catch Farrell's movements. Then, under Clown's incredulous gaze, he saw Farrell reach out and tear open his holy armor, his breastplate. Get lost. After tearing open Clown's breastplate, Farrell threw out a punch. Clown's body was directly smashed into the ground. At this moment, Farrell, who was holding a piece of Clown's holy armor in his hand, directly looked at Caesar. Caesar had the blood of an orc, but at this moment, he was a real beast. Flash! He didn't have time to react, and his chest was directly hit. The dark purple holy armor was instantly smashed into pieces, turned into light, and returned to the holy seal. At the same time, the indestructible lake light was seized by Farrell. It was also a punch. Caesar was directly smashed into the building. In the blink of an eye, Caesar and Clown were both defeated by Farrell. Farrell didn't stop. He didn't even look at Catherine and the others from the myth of Doomsday. As if he had gone crazy, he raised his breastplate with one hand as a shield and held the indestructible lake light with the other and rushed toward the place where the black light was emitting. The elven mark on the blade shone brightly. Under the pitch-black brilliance, it was like a firefly. "Demon, die!" Farrell roared. At this moment, he madly rushed in, raised the indestructible lake light in his hand, and directly slashed at Hopkins without saying a word. At this moment, Sir Hopkins only felt an endless stream of vitality beginning to flow from the Holy Grail into his body through his hands. His aged skin began to regain its firmness. His white hair also began to turn pitch black. His skinny body also began to slowly become stronger. He was experiencing the process of recovering from old age to youth. This wonderful feeling of regaining control of life made him lose himself in the endless sea of passion. When Farrell's sword slashed, he suddenly woke up from this wonderful feeling. He was so frightened. He was afraid that in the end, all of this would be destroyed by Farrell's strike. "No!" Sir Hopkins furiously. However, Farrell's target wasn't him. It was the Holy Grail in his hands. Clang! The indestructible lake light broke through the black light and slashed at the edge of the Holy Grail. Only the sound of collision could be heard. It was like the sound of a huge bell. The whole city shook. Crack! Broken. It was the indestructible lake light that was broken. The blade directly shattered into stardust in front of Farrell. Then a huge force was released from the Holy Grail and directly blasted him away. The shield of the holy armor in his hand directly shattered under the release of this force. Farrell crossed his hands in front of his body to protect himself. 2 long traces of his legs were left on the ground. His white suit was already tattered, and a large part of his body was exposed. At this moment, there was boiling steam coming out. His skin looked like it was burned. He blocked it, but at the same time, he became more confused, crazy, and even terrified. "I can't win. I can't win no matter what. I can't win. Why?" At this moment, he abruptly pressed his hands against his head. The moment he looked at the Holy Grail, his entire body began to tremble. Countless fallen figures appeared before his eyes, one after another, their faces filled with despair. Those were his comrades and companions who were killed by him during the riot. They seemed to be mocking him or scolding him. They rushed up and began to choke his neck and grab his hands and feet. The ground seemed to have turned into a swamp, and countless ghosts reached out their hands from the swamp. In the darkness, they seemed to want to drag him into the swamp. "Don't come over. Don't come over." He turned around and rushed out to escape. "Don't follow me. Don't follow me. I didn't kill them. I didn't kill them. Get away." The craziness and panic of the most powerful knight in history made everyone dumbfounded. He actually escaped like this. While being dumbfounded, everyone secretly heaved a sigh of relief. After all, no one wanted to face this monster again. It was just that, what kind of terrifying thing could cause him to be so terrified that he would flee in panic like a coward? No one knew. They just subconsciously looked at the black light that didn't disperse and a sense of fear slowly rose in their hearts. Catherine hugged her arms tightly in fear. In the distance, Miss Witch, who had thought that victory was in her grasp, felt a mighty force that caused her soul to sink into boundless darkness, even though she didn't know what Farrell was trying to do. She wasn't much better than Farrell. After a scream, the witch ran away from this place. Laughter. At first, it was a chuckle, and then it was an arrogant and wild laughter that even Sir Hopkins himself didn't think would appear on him. He wasn't arrogant, or else he wouldn't have planned everything so carefully. He wouldn't have waited until his hair was white before he started everything. But the power that surged in his body made him instantly lost in the whirlpool of endless power. Even the most powerful knight in history ran away like a stray dog under the power of the Holy Grail. He saw it with his own eyes. The power seemed to have opened all the nerves of the knight in an instant. An indescribable feeling of refreshment washed away his calmness. Calmness, scheming, thinking, what was the use of these under this invincible power? The inhuman's insufferably arrogant gaze and the natural contempt for ordinary humans. It wasn't that they were arrogant, but when their power reached this level, they didn't need to care about the shackles of the world anymore. Great! The power of the Holy Grail was still coming. The more top-grade items were sacrificed, the more powerful its effect would be. Hopkins looked at his strong arms with fascination, feeling the youthful vitality of every part of his body, and the change from a white-haired old man to a strong man. He stopped his wild laughter and called out softly, "Mordred!" A huge holy seal appeared on his chest, and at the same time, a set of holy armor that was secretly hidden in the manor disappeared instantly and then appeared on the knight's body. The moment his palm touched the armor, the holy armor turned into a stream of light and covered the body of Sir Hopkins. Mordred, this holy armor, surging power began to flow into his body. At this moment, Sir Hopkins casually threw out a punch. Boom! With one punch, more than half of the broken palace was destroyed just like that. He slowly raised the arm that threw out the punch and clenched it. At this moment, it was as if the whole world was already in his palm. He suddenly waved his hand. In the already destroyed royal auditorium, the floor directly cracked open, and the broken stones and broken furniture were all pushed to the side. As the floor cracked open, a flight of stairs began to appear. On the stairs, a huge throne made of various materials finally appeared in front of him, just like that. Sir Hopkins looked at the Holy Grail in his hand with satisfaction. It was like a scepter that allowed him to control the world at will. Everything was according to his will. He was immersed in this happy feeling and walked step by step toward the throne on the steps. What no one noticed was that when the black light of the Holy Grail emitted, the body of Knight Lancelot, who was buried under the rubble, quietly wrapped around a trace of black fog. Rumble, inside the collapsed building, a figure flipped over a huge boulder that fell on him and staggered out. It was Mr. Clown. At this moment, Mr. Clown pressed one hand on his shoulder, and his steps were a bit light. But he still walked step by step toward the royal auditorium. Along the way, Mr. Clown saw Catherine, Judas, and a few others. They gathered together, and their expressions were a bit blank, as if they were looking for Caesar. Mr. Clown ignored them and walked into the auditorium. Although the dome was broken, the auditorium was still shining with a dazzling golden light. On the steps, on the huge throne, Hopkins, who was wearing the holy armor, was holding his chin with one hand and looking down from the throne. The Holy Grail was still in his hand. In front of him, his adopted son, Orphan, was kneeling on one knee in front of him. Simpton, who was seriously injured but still managed to crawl out from the rubble, was also kneeling in front of Hopkins. Her Majesty the Queen was also there. Her Majesty the Queen was now shackled by many halos. Her Majesty the Queen lowered her head, and her expression was obviously not good. Dagonite. Hopkins moved his gaze forward a bit. Thank you for your hard work, my knight. It is indeed a bit difficult for you to resist Farrell. Come forward. Mr. Clown shrugged, came to the side of Simpton and Orphan, and also knelt on one knee on the ground. At this moment, Hopkins suddenly said, I will be crowned as the king here. Orphan. At this moment, Orphan nodded and then stood up directly. His hands were holding the ancient crown that he had brought at the beginning. He held the crown, lowered his head, and walked up the steps step by step. But at this moment, Hopkins suddenly waved his hand and said, "Wait a minute, my child." Orphan's expression changed slightly, and then he raised his head in astonishment. He saw that Hopkins wasn't looking at him, but at the night sky. He then raised his head as well. Above the broken dome of the auditorium, there were many figures floating in the air. There were probably more than 30 or 40 of them. These people were all wearing gray and black robes that covered their faces. Every one of them was emitting a strong aura of magic power. Sir Hopkins glanced at them casually, then smiled, and looked at the Queen, who was standing quietly with her head lowered at the bottom of the steps. "It seems that your backer has finally arrived. I'm more curious. How did you manage to invite these magicians, Elizabeth?" "Probably because I transferred the mining rights of the several mineral resources in the Eastern Secret Land." The Queen raised her head. "Now that I think about it, I'm really a prodigal person." The Eastern Secret Land. Hopkins frowned. He knew the amount of mineral resources in that place. Those hidden ores were all very precious magic materials. "You're really generous. After all, you've always been by my side." The Queen looked quite helpless at this moment. "So, why can't you be more careful?" Hopkins turned back. "In fact, I'm still more used to your white-haired appearance, which makes me feel that time has actually passed." "Ridiculous." Hopkins shook his head, then slowly stood up from the throne. "Maybe in your eyes, the inhuman power doesn't have any concept at all. Even the difference between an ordinary night and the 12 nights, in your eyes, is only the difference between a boxer and an ordinary person. Sometimes, quantity doesn't determine victory. In this regard, that Mr. Prime Minister has actually verified it. Is this really the only way?" The Queen sighed. "Hopkins, do you really think that these people from the Magicians Association can fight against the current me?" Hopkins waved his hand. "It doesn't matter. Since it's my coronation, of course, I need some spectators. Although there aren't many people, if they're all magicians, it's still okay." One of the many magicians who had been gazing from the sky suddenly said, "This is the spoils of war that were distributed to the knights after the Great War back then. The Holy Grail. It seems that you're also familiar with that period of history." Hopkins said indifferently, "Maybe you're still very young and don't know its true power." "That's not necessarily true." This man with a little light bird on his shoulder, Mr. Ace, one of the 4 deacons of the Magicians Association's Secret Arts Tower, smiled and said, "In terms of spoils of war, didn't we also hide too? Are you going to fight against me on behalf of the Magicians Association?" Hopkins asked expressionlessly. "No." Deacon Ace shook his head. "I'm just representing the Magicians Association to complete the employment task entrusted by our employer." "Well," Hopkins shook his head with a little pity, then sighed and said, "I'll let you see my current power, and then I'll give you another chance. Choose surrender, or become my sacrifice." With that, Hopkins punched out casually. The wave of fist light rushed out. The people of the Magicians Association seemed to have been prepared, and they all raised their hands in an instant. But before they launched their magic, 2 figures appeared like lightning and blocked the fist light. When the light dissipated, the 2 figures landed in the middle of the auditorium. One of them was wearing an azure holy armor. They looked at Hopkins, who was sitting on the throne, with a heavy expression. "Oh, Gareth and Bedivere, you're here too." Hopkins smiled and opened his hands. "Are you here to celebrate the birth of the new king?" "Knights." "Mr. Hopkins, is it really you?" Gareth looked sad. "For your own selfish reasons. Is it really you?" "Actually, you think I'm wrong. Is that true?" Hopkins shook his head. "Why don't you think that under my leadership, Britain will regain the honor of being the strongest country in the world? Why don't you think I'll do better?" "I'm sorry. I can't agree with such brutal success." Gareth took a deep breath and slowly pulled out his sword. "Mr. Hopkins, please turn back." The moment Gareth activated his weapon, dozens of black shadows appeared behind Bedivere, densely filling the auditorium. Among them, several of the shadow people were directly guarding Her Majesty the Queen's side at this time. "You've been frightened, Your Majesty the Queen." Bedivere said in a deep voice. I'm sorry to let you see this kind of thing inside the Knights organization. We'll clean it up right away. Ha 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 ha. Hopkins's carnival-like laughter appeared again. It was difficult to define his state at this time. Perhaps his personality hadn't changed, but had been affected in some way. He would no longer keep himself calm, following his heart, so it was obviously more pleasurable. You guys aren't enough. Hopkins's eyes suddenly became crazed. What if you add us? Outside the Royal Auditorium, an aged voice suddenly rang out. Along with the voice, several figures rushed into the auditorium. Behind these figures, two old men slowly walked in. They were clearly the only two remaining cabinet elders of the Knights organization, respectively in charge of Odin's treasure and Birmingham's Knights organization. And behind them, several core members of the Myth of Doom, Catherine, Judas, Tipu, and Dobuz, were already restrained and escorted in by more than a dozen knights. All of them revealed a defeated expression and hung their heads dejectedly. Hashtag, 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 hashtag PS. The next chapter will be later. Genius remembers this site's address in a second. Mobile version of reading website. Chapter 1318. Tresty. In. Gareth cried out in surprise, and then looked at the other figures that had arrived with the bearded man. Garis, Kai, Eckhart, you guys. The first few figures who appeared were none other than the current 12 round table members who escorted the different pavilion elders to the Mist City. When the Mist City was in a riot, they were the first to take action. They were responsible for suppressing different places and evacuating the crowd. We received a message from Bedivere, Tresty said in a deep voice. It was hard to believe at first, but now, shaking his head, Tresty's expression didn't look good. He sighed and looked at the clown Dagonet. It seems that there's a traitor among us. Thank you for the compliment. Mr. Clown showed a bright smile. Seeing this, Gareth gritted his teeth and his eyes dimmed. At this moment, one of the two pavilion elders who led a group of knights stepped forward. Hopkins, I'm sad for the bloodline of the Night King. Surrender. Not only were there 6 12-round table members in the auditorium, but there were also the magician troops waiting in the sky. Outside the Royal Auditorium, there were also hundreds of powerful middle-level and upper-level knights. At this moment, this place was completely surrounded. The first one. Right at this moment, Hopkins suddenly opened his mouth and said something. What followed was a dark red ray of light that shot out from his slightly raised finger. The ray of light directly passed through the crowd, passed through the 12 people at the round table, and directly pierced through the forehead of the cabinet elder who had just spoken. A second ago, he was still speaking righteously and majestically, but in the next second, he completely lost his head, and his body fell to the ground. Puff! Until the body fell and made a dull sound. Everyone, all the members of the night mechanical unit who were present, as if they had just woken up from a dream, showed an extremely shocked and furious expression. The second one. But it wasn't over yet. When the finger pointed, the red light shot out again. In the auditorium, a knight who was watching the Doomsday Myth prisoner was directly penetrated in the chest and became a corpse. Hopkins! An angry voice suddenly came out of Tresty's mouth. In an instant, the 12 round table members put on their armor and attacked Sir Hopkins, who was on the stairs. Sir Hopkins sneered at this moment, and the Holy Grail in his hand was easily swung out. The 6 knights who had inherited the power and the highest combat power of the Night Mechanical Unit were swept to the ground at the same time by an unbelievably powerful force. The holy armors on their bodies directly exploded, and the fragments returned to their holy seals. Defeat. Defeat in an instant. The Royal Auditorium was dead silent at this moment. Even the magicians who were temporarily watching the battle were silent at this moment. It was fine if they didn't know, but if they didn't know the 12 round table members, they would know what kind of ability they had the ability. At this moment, as he watched Gareth and the others fall to the ground and vomit blood incessantly, the expression of the last surviving Edinburgh Knights cabinet elder changed drastically. It wasn't just him. The numerous middle and upper-level knights beside and behind him were all the same. Fear grew. I've said before. Looking at the dead silent Sir Hopkins, he smiled faintly and said, "I'll give you a chance to choose. Everyone from the Magicians Association. Of course, this includes all the knights here. And you rule for it." His gaze finally fell on the Edinburgh Grand Elder. "Do you plan to kneel before me and become the new king, or do you plan to be buried here to accompany your old friends?" Sir Hopkins's gaze instantly became majestic. Under his gaze, the last Grand Elder suddenly couldn't bear it and knelt on the ground subconsciously. He looked at all this in horror. He looked at the other 12 Round Table members and the middle-level and upper-level knights who were looking at him with either fear, disbelief, or confusion. In the end, he gritted his teeth. Since he couldn't resist, then, "New king, I'm willing to submit to you." He took a deep breath and said, "I'll become your follower." "Good. Rule Ford. I knew you were a smart person." Hopkins said, "Do you know why I didn't kill you the second time? Because next, I'll be reorganizing the Knight organization, so I need someone who can help me manage it. In the future, in the new Knight organization, you'll be the one with the highest authority besides me." "Thank you." He didn't say much. Since he had already decided to submit, this Grand Elder was very clear about his current position and position. "Then what about you?" Sir Hopkins looked around at everyone at this time. "Become my sacrifice, or become the sword in my hand. Help me open up a prosperous Britain and become the hero and legend of the new era. I'm willing to submit to you, new king." Unexpectedly, the first one to shout out was Mr. Clown, who had a bright smile on his face. Even though he was originally on Sir Hopkins's side, he was still the first to kneel down. "Dagonite, you bastard." Gareth, who had always been modest to others, wiped the blood from his mouth, stood up again, and cursed. By the way, as if he was afraid that Gareth wasn't angry enough, Mr. Clown narrowed his eyes and laughed. "I was the one who destroyed the headquarters of the Fog City. I also cut off Geraint's head with my own hands." What Mr. Gareth, who had already stood up, suddenly felt as if all the strength in his body had been sucked out, and his hands hung down powerlessly. "I'm willing to submit to you, my king." Suddenly, a deep voice sounded from Gareth's side. What made him unable to believe was that the person who followed the Clown Dagonite submission was actually a fellow member of the Round Table 12, the one with the name K. "Please accept my loyalty, future king." Another member of the 12 Round Table made his choice at this time. "Eckhart, even you." Mr. Gareth was shocked and angry at this moment, and even more so sad. One after another, the middle and upper level knights knelt on the ground after the only Grand Elder and a few other members of the 12 Round Table had taken the lead to submit. Even half of the knights who were watching over the few people of the mythical Doomsday had also chosen to submit at this time. Mr. Gareth's footsteps staggered, and he kept turning his body in place. Every time a voice made an oath, it was the time for him to move his weak legs. Not long after, more than 60% of the knights had already made their choice to submit to him. It's true, the tables have turned just like that. The voice of the mythical Doomsday pharmacist T-Poo, who was shackled, sounded incongruously at this moment. Gareth obviously heard it, but he couldn't say anything to refute it. He looked at the small number of knights who were at a loss, but in the end, they still chose to remain silent and didn't step out to submit to him. In the end, only he, Bedivere, and Tresty, the 3 members of the 12 Round Table, were still standing upright. If that's the case, Hopkins shook his head at this time, seemingly a little dissatisfied. Not all the knights of the Round Table had chosen to submit to this point. Gareth, Tresty, Bedivere, you have chosen to oppose me, right? I can't violate the oath I made. Gareth took a deep breath. Even if I'm the only one left, isn't there still me? The bearded man clenched his fists at this time, and his originally pale face had a touch of indomitable will. Of course, there's still Bedivere. I've decided on my epitaph, I will engrave the names of my best friends in this life, Gareth and Bedivere, your original names. If that's the case, I'd better choose to betray you. Dr. Bedivere said indifferently. Even so, he silently walked to the side of the 2 people. The knights began to move. Those who submitted silently gathered under the stairs. And those who didn't submit in the end silently came behind the remaining 3 members of the 12 Round Table. In the end, more than 70% of them separated. Sir Hopkins, who quietly watched all of this, showed a trace of a smile and looked up at the magician troops at the top. So, what's your choice? But after a moment of silence, Ace slowly said, "It seems that the content of this employment has far exceeded the degree of the preset. I'm sorry, Your Majesty. I think the several Tower Masters should now feel that the things you've done are not worth us continuing to maintain this employment relationship. And, Mr. Hopkins, right? Are you really not going to let us leave? Send my regards to your chairman." Hopkins said indifferently at this time, "Just say, after the matter here is over, I will personally visit. But you don't have to rush to leave. You might as well participate in my coronation ceremony." "As you wish." Mr. Ace smiled faintly. The new king of Britain. Sir Hopkins waved his hand, then sat back on the throne and looked down again. "Elizabeth, how is it? All your reliance is gone. I'll also give you a chance to choose." Her Majesty, whose eyes were dim, raised her head at this time and looked at the throne not far away. She heard Sir Hopkins say calmly, "If you also choose to be loyal to me, I may be able to grant you a new life. Even restoring you to your most beautiful age is just a simple matter." Her Majesty the Queen slowly looked at the knights gathered around Hopkins, and then looked at the knights standing behind Gareth and the others, who were completely disproportionate. In the end, she slowly sighed and said with a wry smile, "Hopkins, it seems that I have lost. Your choice." He was waiting for the final result. "Me, the Queen of Britain, will not yield to anyone." The Queen said loudly, "Loyal people of the Knight Organization, although I don't have the bloodline of your Knight King, I'm the current Queen of Britain's most legitimate heir to the royal family. I'm very happy that you can still stand by my side in this most difficult time. While life still exists and power still exists, I will accompany you to welcome the last darkness before dawn." "No." Gareth took a deep breath at this time. In front of this great danger, he said, "If I have to choose a king, I'd rather choose you. My Majesty the Queen. The king that the knights should be loyal to should be like you. Please accept my allegiance, Your Majesty the Queen." As if to fight against Hopkins, Gareth knelt down in front of the Queen. Seeing this, Bedivere and Tresty looked at each other and made the same choice. The small number of middle-ranking and high-ranking knights who remained also swore an oath to the Queen. This was the first time in the history of the Knight Organization that knights swore to the so-called royal family, instead of the cold statue of the Knight King in the organization. Wang Tsung disdained to do it himself, especially when he had enough followers. At this moment, Simpton coldly snorted and then waved his evil sword, which directly stabbed into the ground in front of Simpton. "Kill them all." Hopkins waved his hand. "Pledge your loyalty to me, knights." Simpton directly lifted the magic sword. The pitch-black magic energy started to wrap around his body, and then the magic armor appeared. He was the first to move. "Like I said, Mr. Gareth, when you're needed, you will also need people like me." The holy armor was broken, and it was still repairing itself in the holy seal. Facing Simpton, who was wearing the magic armor, Gareth could only fight with his usual sword. As for Mr. Clown and the other knights of the Round Table who had submitted to the Queen, they slowly walked toward Tresty and Bedivere. The remaining mid-level and upper-level knights gritted their teeth and raised their swords toward their former companions. "Knights, I'll watch here. I'll stand here. I won't let my eyes close, even if it's just a blink of an eye. I'll stand here until the last one of you falls in front of me." The Queen's voice resounded in the hall, sonorous and powerful, when the last knight falls. "I'll follow you." For the Queen, she was just an ordinary person. Time had robbed her of her beauty, and time had turned her into an old woman who was no longer slim. She was as fragile as a candle in the wind. But just as she said, she would stand here until the last moment, like a fountain. She didn't bring physical strength to the loyal knights, but courage to press forward. High fighting spirit radiated from their bodies. Compared to the knights who had submitted and raised their weapons silently, the spirit of fighting to the death was so distinct. At this moment, the ones who had submitted were only silently attacking, several against one. For the queen, the battle surrounded the queen, and in an instant it started. But no one knew whether it was intentional or not. But the queen, who was just an ordinary person, stood where no one approached her. From the beginning to the end, just as she said, she didn't close her eyes and didn't even blink once. She just imprinted the faces in her eyes. Hopkins was very dissatisfied with the queen's current state, and a kind of irritation began to grow in his heart. The Holy Grail seemed to constantly whisper to him. This voice had been ringing in his mind since the moment it held him up. Destroy everything, devour everything. Don't hesitate, the strongest power is given to you. Destroy everything, devour everything. He shook his head lightly, instinctively wanting to drive this voice out of his head, but in the end, he still slowly stood up. The irritation in his heart made him walk down the throne step by step down the stairs. In the fierce battle that was like a storm, Sir Hopkins entered a place where there was no one and finally arrived in front of Her Majesty the Queen. You're really unwise. Elizabeth. Sir Hopkins suddenly sighed. If it was only the dignity of the country, maybe it would be a good thing. Many times we clearly have the ability to change everything, but in the end, we become powerless. The Queen said in a low voice, a long, long time ago, someone once told me, the only one who can change everything is the one who becomes the king. Is that so? Sir Hopkins nodded. Then, stay here with me and watch. Let's see who will become the king in the end. The situation of the battle. Actually, it was clear from the beginning. Temporarily losing the power of the holy armor, Gareth and the other two faced the most dangerous battle. Courage didn't bring enough power to overcome the number of enemies. It couldn't even be considered a fierce battle. It was a completely one-sided battle. The smile on Hopkins' face became wider. Looking at the Queen's stubborn appearance in front of him, the irritation in his heart seemed to be released to the greatest extent. It seems that the winner and loser will be decided soon. Hopkins smiled. The Queen nodded. Yes, it seems like it's really so in the chaotic auditorium. At this moment, there seemed to be a figure quietly approaching behind Sir Hopkins. Bang! Just as Mr. Gareth's sword was blocking the demonic sword, and his body was being pressed down inch by inch to the point where he had reached his limit and was about to lose his life under the demonic sword, a huge force suddenly emanated from the auditorium. Ripples, wave-like ripples, rippled out. Accompanied by a strong wind, the weak ones were directly sent flying out of the auditorium by the impact of this force at this moment. The stronger ones had to protect their own bodies with all their strength, but their bodies were also moved back by a large amount. Not many were able to stand firmly in their original places. A black beam of light shot up to the sky. In the corner of the auditorium, where a pile of rubble had been buried, the rubble had turned into powder at this moment. In this black beam of light, her body, which was lying on the ground, seemed to be lifted up by some kind of force. Bending her waist, she stood up and then straightened her waist. Her body left the ground and floated. Her hands were slightly spread out, and at the same time, she closed her eyes tightly. Her long hair, which was tied up, was also scattered under the violent airflow. Then, under the influence of the airflow, each strand of hair flew up and stood upright. Lancelot, Her Majesty the Queen, opened her mouth at this moment. She didn't expect this to happen at this moment, and showed an instant of panic. Under the impact of this powerful force, the remaining powerful knights stared, the only female knight of the Round Table of this generation, dumbfounded. This wasn't the power of the Round Table. A strong force was constantly emitted from her body, getting stronger and stronger. Finally, she opened her eyes. This pair of eyes seemed to contain no feelings. Wherever her gaze went, the knights felt a tremor from the bottom of their hearts. And Hopkins was already frightened to the point that he broke out in a cold sweat. Outside the auditorium, on the stairs leading to the Royal Auditorium, a figure slowly walked up. It was wearing a black robe and a silver-white, mouthless mask on its face, which completely covered its face. When the black light broke through the air and appeared, it stopped. Looking at the black light, It seemed to be thinking about something. Its hand was holding something at this moment. The head. It was Caesar's head. Hashtag, 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 PS. 13/30. Chapter 13:19. She was still wearing the same neutral attire of tuxedo and a white shirt, but she was different from her usual simple attire. Right now, she had an indescribable beauty, or rather, a seductive beauty. The huge power she released seemed to be endless. She slowly moved towards Sir Hopkins. The black light supported her body, and her empty eyes seemed to indicate that she was not in a normal state. Since Lancelot released her power, Sir Hopkins felt an unprecedented danger approaching, as if the Holy Grail in his hand couldn't eliminate his uneasiness. And she slowly approached, as if there was nothing that could stop her. Sir Hopkins's pupils contracted slightly. He looked around and then fixed his eyes on Simpton. After seeing Hopkins's gaze, Simpton didn't stop. As if he had an instinctive reaction, he directly gave up the great opportunity to kill Gareth. Like a flash of black lightning, he raised the demon's sword and flashed in front of Lancelot. From top to bottom, the demon's sword drew a straight line. Perhaps it was going to split Lancelot in half. Right now, she didn't react at all. When the blade of the demon sword approached her, even her eyes didn't change. She just stretched out her palm, as if there was a black light. It violently contracted and expanded at this moment. Simpton, who was wearing a black armor, was embedded in the air. It was like turning from a three-dimensional to a two-dimensional space. This strange scene startled the remaining people, and the next scene was even more frightening than when Sir Hopkins defeated the Knights of the Round Table with one strike. Because they heard the sound of something breaking. It sounded like something was breaking. Simpton's body shattered like a crack that fell to the ground, turning into pieces of irregular fragments. He was directly shattered. Only the demon's sword was left, falling to the ground. This isn't the power of inheritance. The Knights of the Round Table, regardless of whether they had surrendered to the side or resisted, had all worked with Lancelot before. As the only female Round Table knight of the current generation, it could be said that she was the most popular person among the knights. Everyone knew her. Is she really Lancelot, and not another Hopkins? What are you talking about? I don't know. I just feel like it. Whispering didn't stop or change anything at this moment. Before the shock of Simpton's death could be digested, Lancelot started to move again. Her target was still Sir Hopkins. Finally, Sir Hopkins's eyes focused to the extreme. Feeling the powerful, surging power in his body, under this instinctive threat and fear, he directly threw a punch. Just like that, a beam of light with terrifying power was shot out, crashing directly into Lancelot. A seemingly invisible barrier appeared in front of Lancelot. Sir Hopkins's attack seemed to have hit a mirror. The attack that came from the front was reflected from the side in the next moment. The power of the attack was not weak in the slightest. After the reflection, a corner of the auditorium was directly smashed into pieces. A crack even directly split open on another building outside the auditorium. Sir Hopkins's eyes suddenly widened. He exhaled a mouthful of turbid air and continuously threw out punches that were much faster than clowns. Dozens of light bullets at this moment seemed to shoot out from the same plane at the same time, the concentrated light bullets, each containing extremely destructive power. When these dozens of light bullets arrived, that invisible barrier appeared once again. Perhaps only when this barrier appeared and the moment the light bullets hit the barrier would they be able to see its existence. But the light bullets were still reflected in the end. Boom, 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 boom. The light bullets that were reflected and shot out were crazily destroying everything around. Dozens, hundreds, and even close to 1,000. The number of light bullets kept increasing, and the speed at which they were shot out also increased crazily. However, the speed at which they were reflected also increased at the same speed. Finally, Sir Hopkins stopped. Even with his powerful physique and crazy power, under this kind of continuous attack, he already felt a trace of fatigue. There was no way to stop it. Lancelot had already moved to the front of Sir Hopkins. The distance between them was as long as an arm's length. I don't believe it. Sir Hopkins lowered his head and looked at his own palm, muttering to himself. Finally, his face became ferocious, and the craziest side that was hidden in his heart was completely stimulated. Holy Grail. He raised the Holy Grail in his hand. Black rays were shot out from the Holy Grail and reflected. The rays of light released from the Holy Grail were like the curves of fireworks falling in the night sky. One after another, they were reflected in front of this invisible barrier. Even the power of the Holy Grail? I don't believe it. Sir Hopkins was in disbelief at first, then he panicked, and then he lost his sense of propriety. He was like a child who was holding a weapon, but was shouting why he couldn't win against the adults in front of him. The Holy Grail was still under his control, launching fierce attacks, but he himself was retreating step by step under these attacks. He retreated, until he retreated to the first step of the stairs leading to the throne. He suddenly lost his balance and fell back, sitting on the stairs, but he didn't stop launching attacks from the Holy Grail. You're not Lancelot. Hopkins suddenly shivered. Who are you? As if she didn't hear him, she just stretched out her hand and made a grabbing motion. The Holy Grail was directly taken away from Hopkins's hand at this moment. The moment the Holy Grail left his hand, a huge uneasiness and fear, as if half of his body was cut off, instantly made Hopkins lose all his reason. Get it back to me. Get back to me, mine. It's mine, it's mine. It's mine. As if feeling Hopkins's madness at this moment, the Mordred, his holy armor, directly gave him more power. In an instant, the holy armor released a strong light. It's mine! The power that burst out once again pushed everyone out like the eye of a whirlwind. Countless gravel directly rolled up at this moment. Hopkins attacked her recklessly. Bang! It was the same feeling of expansion and contraction. Time seemed to stop on Hopkins for a second, and when time flowed again, the Mordred, his holy armor, was already full of all kinds of cracks. It seemed like it would break at any time. Hopkins directly spat out a mouthful of blood, and his body was directly embedded in the stairs, smashing a huge hole in it. But she didn't care about Hopkins's existence from beginning to end. The moment the Holy Grail was in her hand, her empty eyes only looked at the Holy Grail in her hand. Chi, 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 chi. The Holy Grail at this moment began to tremble violently, as if it was struggling. Finally, her already terrifying power was released, and it increased by several times again. Crack! At this moment, a crack suddenly appeared at the bottom of the Holy Grail, and then like the lines of thunder, it went up. The moment the crack extended to the mouth of the cup, the Holy Grail directly split into two halves. You broke it. You broke it. You actually broke it. I won't let you go. Never. It was as if his beloved was taken away. The moment the Holy Grail broke, Sir Hopkins had already lost control. But the Holy Grail did break. Like a broken cup, it directly fell to the ground. The moment it fell to the ground, everyone in the magician's troupe opened their eyes wide. This was as famous as the two secret treasures of the Magicians' Association. It was almost a godly item, and it directly, after the Holy Grail shattered and fell to the ground, Lancelot suddenly stopped moving. The huge power in her body also began to decrease at this moment. Her hair slowly fell down. She also fell from a state of being in the air to the ground, as if she withdrew from one state to another. The moment she fell to the ground, Lancelot directly fell to the ground. I won't let you go. Lancelot. But Sir Hopkins, who had already lost control, couldn't suppress the anger in his heart at this moment. He got out of the hole in the stairs and launched an angry attack on Lancelot, who fell to the ground again. Although the Holy Grail disappeared, the power he had obtained didn't seem to disappear. Go to hell. Hopkins' fist, which was covered with the holy armor, fiercely punched towards Lancelot's head. However, at this moment, when his fist was about to smash Lancelot's head, something seemed to block his fist. It was a spear, or rather a spear tip that was cut off from a spear. The spear tip was only about 1 foot long. At that moment, The person holding the tip of the spear in his hand was a black-robed figure with a faceless mask who had appeared at some point in time. At this moment, the moment the black-robed man blocked Pu Qin's attack, he suddenly turned around and kicked Pu Qin in the chest, directly sending him flying. Who was it? In the midst of his astonishment, Hopkins' mind was in a mess. Time and time again, someone appeared to block him. The kick didn't cause any real damage to him. It only had the effect of pushing him back. When Hopkins stood up again, the veins on his forehead had already swelled up due to his anger. But at this moment, a shrill scream rang out. Caesar! That was Catherine's blood-curdling scream. She fell to the ground in an instant, her eyes staring blankly. Her face also became pale, as if she had lost her soul. She suddenly grabbed her own face with both hands, forcefully scratching out traces of blood. Catherine! In the end, as if she couldn't bear the pain at this moment, Catherine directly spat out a mouthful of blood and then collapsed. Is it really Oberon? In the ruins, Gareth and Tresty supported each other and staggered out. Their bodies were almost pushed out of the royal auditorium under the impact of the final burst of power between Lancelot and Hopkins. But the moment they saw the head in the black-robed figure's hand, they still couldn't believe it. They had just fought with Oberon a few hours ago, so they had a very deep understanding of Oberon's strength. This guy was able to injure the abnormal feral. At this moment, the black-robed and masked mysterious person directly threw Caesar's head out, towards Hopkins. Facing Caesar's head flying towards him, Hopkins almost didn't hesitate at all. He directly punched out and directly blew up the entire head. Immediately, a mist of blood surged. At the same time, Catherine, who had just woken up and caught a glimpse of this scene, directly passed out again and fell into Judas' arms. Who are you? He felt threatened, but it was obviously not as terrifying and strong as Lancelot's when she was in that strange state. But at this time, Hopkins, who had already lost the Holy Grail, couldn't help but be vigilant. So far, the changes that had happened were all unexpected, especially the Holy Grail being crushed. The black-robed, mysterious person didn't speak at this time. He just casually picked up Lancelot, who was on the ground, and then slowly walked towards Her Majesty. What happened to her? Her Majesty was much calmer than anyone else. Facing this mysterious person, Her Majesty didn't even have the slightest bit of panic, but the Shadow Man's protection that Bedivere had released for her at the beginning had already been exhausted under the continuous attacks. It could be said that the current Her Majesty was really in a state of no protection at all, but she obviously didn't have the slightest bit of panic. The mysterious person just shook his head and then handed over Lancelot. Then, he turned around again and faced Sir Hopkins. Her Majesty helped Lancelot to sit down. After feeling Lancelot's breathing, she slightly relaxed. Who is it? Elizabeth, your person? Hopkins frowned. After the Holy Grail was crushed, his madness seemed to have gradually subsided, and he began to calm down a little. Her Majesty slowly stood up and said softly, "Just think of it as my guardian angel, someone who will always protect me." Your protector? Hopkins frowned again. Ridiculous. If you really have a guardian, it's impossible for the Knight organization to not have a record, and it's an inhuman at this level. Elizabeth, do you really think that such a lie can fool people? Hopkins snorted coldly, then looked at the magician team hiding in the sky. They had been watching the battle silently like a poisonous snake and could suddenly attack at any time. He sneered and said, "I'm afraid you're also a member of the Magician Association, right? What you're holding, if I'm not wrong, is probably one of the trophies of the Magician Association from 100 years ago. Holy Spear, Longinus, right?" The mysterious person stretched out his hand, and half of the tip of the spear slowly stretched out from his robe. It looked inconspicuous, and there were even rust stains on it. But it was this spear tip, which seemed to have decayed, that forcibly blocked the furious strike of Hopkins, who was full of power. "Sir," unexpectedly at this time, Deacon Ace, who had been silently watching the battle, suddenly said, "I admire you for recognizing the Holy Spear at a glance." Indeed, This is indeed the trophies, However, we don't know who its current user is. I can tell you very clearly that it's not a member of our Magician Association. Ridiculous. If it's not a member of your association, if it's not the user of the Holy Spear, do you think that your Tower Master will be willing to let an outsider use it? Hopkins shook his head. What if it can only be used once? Deacon Ace said indifferently. What if the Holy Spear has a spell engraved by several Tower Masters together? No matter where it is lost, it will instantly return to the Tower Master's side. Oh, I forgot to say this Holy Spear is also in the employment contract of Her Majesty, and it was the first to arrive here. So even if I want to take it back, it's impossible. Of course, not just anyone can use the Holy Spear, so I'm also very curious about what this guardian looks like. If possible, maybe you can take off its mask yourself. I'll look forward to it. Hopkins' face darkened. After losing the Holy Grail, the feeling of being in control gradually faded away. When he regained his senses, he couldn't help but be alarmed at how he had fallen under the temptation of the Holy Grail in such a short time. As far as the eye could see, the knights had either collapsed or died. Even the knights at the Round Table were either severely injured or unable to fight anymore. Even Simpson, the magic sword user that he had spent a lot of time cultivating, was already dead. Obviously, this wasn't what he wanted. Now, if he couldn't defeat this mysterious guardian by the Queen's side, then what awaited him would be eternal damnation. Also, there was the magician army that was eyeing him covetously. But he already had the Mordred's holy armor, which meant that he had the same powerful strength as Farlier. After this victory, he could still regroup. His body had already recovered its youth, which meant that time had reset, and he could do more things in the future. The Holy Grail was only the path to an inhuman power, now that he had obtained it. Although it was already destroyed, at least he wouldn't lose himself and become its devouring slave. It was both good news and bad news, but it was obviously not a bad situation. Taking a deep breath, his thoughts were completed in an instant. Feeling the surging power, Sir Hopkins revealed a good-looking smile. It seems that this is the final obstacle on my path to becoming a king. It doesn't matter. The road to success is always accompanied by cutting through thorns and thorns. Only in this way will the final fruits of victory appear sweet. Hopkins moved. Speed, strength, strength. All of these had directly surpassed the peak that the 12 knights of this generation could reach. The moment Hopkins moved, the mysterious guardian of the royal family also turned into a blur. With the Holy Spear in hand, it was completely unafraid of Hopkins's attack. But after all, it wasn't the real Holy Spear user of the Magician Association, and it didn't know how to activate the true power of the Holy Spear. It only relied on some of the basic passive abilities of the Holy Spear. It seemed that it would be very difficult for the guardian of the royal family to defeat the powerful Sir Hopkins. Her Majesty the Queen had a hint of nervousness at this time. This is really the last. If it still fails, then we can only... The Queen looked at the back of the guardian in the final battle, and her worry gradually grew stronger. It's not easy for her. Deacon Ace silently watched all of this happen and whispered to his companion beside him, "She's just an ordinary person, but she can actually reach this point in the inhuman domain. Should I say, she's really worthy of being the longest reigning queen in the world." The final battle hadn't stopped yet. The battle between the guardian of the royal family and Hopkins had moved to the sky above the Palace of Westminster, and it had been going on for a long time. This level of battle had already moved a magician to the extent that he couldn't help but be moved. Deacon Ace had even begun to calculate which side he should help. Perhaps he should wait for the final result. "Your power is very strong, far beyond Gareth and Clown," Hopkins said quickly. "But compared to me, there's still a big gap. If it weren't for the Holy Spear, you wouldn't have been able to hold on until now." The guardian of the royal family still didn't speak, but his attacks became fiercer and fiercer. Every time Hopkins blocked a blow, it was only a tie, but he still tried to use words to disturb the guardian. "Why did you become Elizabeth's guardian? Who are you to the royal family? Actually, you don't have to follow Elizabeth. She's just an old and soft-hearted woman after all. But me, I'm strong now. I have power. All the more reason for you to ally with me. Old man, how can you leave me out of such an interesting battle? A burst of crazy laughter suddenly came from outside the royal hall, and a figure quickly rushed into the night sky. Then, several flashing cold lights directly shot toward the guardian of the royal family. The person who had suddenly made a move was the clown, Dagonet. What shot out were flying knives. The flying knives broke through the air, directly aiming at the vital parts of the guardian's body. The guardian didn't panic in the face of danger and waved the holy spear to cut down the flying knives one by one. Oh, is it Dagonet? Hopkins couldn't help but be secretly surprised. He didn't expect that the one who persisted until the end was actually this guy. The clown's crying face was very funny, but Hopkins felt that he was quite pleasing to the eye. Then, let's take down this so-called guardian of the royal family together. Hopkins laughed loudly, with the spirit of a monarch who charged and killed the enemy on the battlefield. Okay, take him down. The sound of laughter came out from Dagonet's mouth, and suddenly it turned cold. Take you down. Take you down. At this moment, Hopkins was ready to throw a punch, but a voice appeared behind him, in his ears. One of them flew over and quietly pierced into Sir Hopkins' back. Sharp pain. The sharp pain from his back made Hopkins's eyes widen. The stab in his back made him shocked and angry. Dagonet, you? Without waiting for Hopkins to adapt to this sudden change, the guardian of the royal family took a deep breath at this moment and directly threw the tip of the holy spear in his hand. Bang! As if he poured all his strength into this attack. The air instantly produced an umbrella-shaped airflow that only appeared when there was a sound barrier. The tip of the spear directly pierced through Sir Hopkins's chest, and then directly into the ground. Why? Dagonet, you... Hopkins lowered his head and looked at the huge wound on his chest. In a moment of absent-mindedness, he only felt that his mind was blank. Suddenly, he thought of something that would happen in countless historical reincarnations. Monarchs often died because of betrayal. Because... The clown laughed in a voice that only he and Hopkins could hear, and said softly, Elizabeth is my mother. Elizabeth is my mother. Hopkins's body fell from the sky. Above his line of sight was Dagonet's face looking down. That big crying face. He seemed to have fallen into an abyss. Bang! He fell into the ruins of the royal auditorium. The moment he landed, a bloody smell spurted out from his throat. Hopkins painfully stretched out his arm, as if he wanted to grab something first. The guardian of the royal family and the clown Dagonet slowly landed at this time, standing on both sides of Hopkins. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Hopkins's body began to shake violently. The Mordred, holy armor that was full of cracks directly shattered at this moment, and the holy seal on his chest also directly peeled off from his body at this time. The holy seal at this time was like a huge coat of arms, quietly floating in the air. His arms began to dry up, and his body that was full of vitality also began to lose strength at this time. In the blink of an eye, Hopkins once again became white-haired, even much older than before. My body, my power, my... He crawled on the ground with difficulty, like an old dog. It seems that the time estimation is still wrong. You can actually hold on until now. Dagonet smiled and said, Old man, are you surprised? What did you do to me? Hopkins couldn't help but howl. Mr. Clown waved his hand and said, It's nothing. It's just that the sphere that I gave you before, which contained the souls of all the people in the Knight's mechanism headquarters, didn't contain the souls of Geraint and the others at all. I just found a pig farm and killed pigs to collect them. You actually, Dagonet laughed and said, I've been looking for records about the Holy Grail, as well as the influence it caused when it first appeared. I found that this toy is indeed convenient, but it seems to be a little rigid. Although I don't know what the person who created it originally intended to do with it, it's obviously not to help humans fulfill their wishes. It will selectively fulfill the wishes according to the type of wish. Your wish is to have a strong physique, to have the same strength as Farlier, as well as Mordred's holy armor. Old man, you have too many wishes. A retarded way of thinking like Holy Grail can't satisfy you, but it will faithfully fulfill these so-called wishes. So, all your wishes will be fulfilled, but the next best thing is that before this wish is fulfilled, there will be a time limit. Sir Hopkins's face was now as pale as ash. Of course, if you can continue to contribute offerings, it will naturally continue to renew these wishes. Mr. Clown shrugged and said, "It's like a bottomless pit that can never be filled, and all you can do is to continuously satisfy it, until, in the end, even you are swallowed by it. In this way, I roughly understand the original creator's intention. So on the whole, you've lost, and you've lost completely, Hopkins." "I don't believe it. I absolutely don't believe it." He wailed and climbed the collapsed stairs leading to the throne. The throne was already damaged, and only a small armrest was left. Dagonite didn't chase after him, and just watched casually. As for the guardian of the royal family, he didn't say a word from the beginning to the end. Finally, Hopkins climbed to the front of the stairs. He used the last of his strength to crawl like a snail to the destroyed throne. "Father." "Oh." Often. He heard a voice. He saw his adopted son, who had been lurking around the prime minister for many years. "Often. My child, help me. Take me away." Like a dying patient, he grasped the last straw. Often squatted in front of Hopkins in grief and sighed. "Father, we lost. Forget it. Her Majesty the Queen might let you go." "I didn't lose. I won't lose." That was his last and most resounding voice. With the last of his strength, he grabbed Offin's collar and pulled Offin's face in front of him. His sunken eyes were now bloodshot. "I won't lose." Bang! The sound of gunfire. Offen nodded and hugged Sir Hopkins, whispering in his ear, "Yes, you won't lose, father. This is only a nightmare, so I came to drive them away. Even you betrayed me." In his arms, Offen was holding a silver pistol. "I'm sorry, father," Offen whispered. "No matter what, before I became your adopted son, it was Elizabeth's mother who adopted me. In addition, Dagonite is actually my older brother. We met her in the orphanage together." No one knew if Hopkins heard the last words. His eyes had lost their luster, and his body was still in Offen's arms, not moving at all. The royal auditorium was now silent. Then, Her Majesty the Queen's voice slowly sounded under the night sky, as if she was relieved. "Finally, it's over." The surviving knights began to gather at this moment. Confused and frightened, they supported each other's bodies. They were still divided into two formations. Finally, the surviving knights gathered in front of the stairs leading to the royal auditorium, looking at the ruins of the royal auditorium in silence. A figure slowly walked out of the ruins. It was Her Majesty the Queen. Right now, she only had a slightly tired expression on her face. Behind her, apart from the royal guards, there was also Dagonite and Ofen. At the same time, she held a cane in her hand. This was the cane that Hopkins had been holding. On the cane was the Night King's bloodline, the proof of the royal power of the Night royal family. She raised the scepter in her hand, faced the knights, and said loudly, "Sir Hopkins and the leader of the myth of Doomsday, Oberon, the culprits of this rebellion, have been executed. There's no need to continue this war. From now on, there's only me in Britain, asterisk, 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 asterisk." Looking around at the quiet bottom of the stairs, Her Majesty the Queen's voice sounded again. "If you're still willing to continue fighting, I'll lead my knights to fight with you to the end." In the camp that had already pledged allegiance, at this moment, everyone was looking at Her Majesty, who was standing on the stairs with a complicated expression. They were all silent. What else could they say? Resist? The royal guardians could defeat Hopkins, who had gained great power. But they, including the Knights of the Round Table in the formation, were no longer able to fight. Besides, in the sky, most of the magicians had maintained their combat power from the beginning to the end, and now they were standing behind Her Majesty the Queen. Clang! Finally, in the camp, someone directly threw down the weapon in his hand. Dagonet. Garrett's expression was very complicated at this moment. He stared blankly at Mr. Clown, who was standing beside the Queen. He wanted to rush up and ask some questions, but in the end, he restrained himself. Finally, he slowly exhaled, only feeling physically and mentally exhausted. He had never spent such a long night. Her Majesty the Queen looked at the crowd and showed a gentle smile. Finally, thank you for being able to survive, my loyal knights. Yes, Your Majesty. The surviving knights in the formation offered their loyalty and knelt down. There weren't many places left in the Palace of Westminster. The number of intact rooms that could be found could be counted with one hand. Finally, Her Majesty the Queen held a box with both hands and came to one of the rooms accompanied by Dagonet and Orphan. Wait for me outside the door. Her Majesty the Queen ordered the two in a low voice. Orphan was a little hesitant, but Mr. Clown didn't seem to care. He whistled and leaned against the wall, using his hands as a pillow. Good child. The Queen smiled and then began to tidy up her clothes in front of the door. After some time, Her Majesty the Queen seemed to be satisfied with her appearance at this time. Then, she took a deep breath and pushed the door open. Open the door, close the door. Her Majesty the Queen took another deep breath and then said with an impeccable smile, Teacher, I've kept you waiting. In the room, Miss Maid was sitting on the sofa and drinking black tea leisurely. I made tea. Have a seat, Miss Maid said casually. Her Majesty the Queen walked over slowly and sat down. Her posture was straight and calm. I haven't drunk tea personally made by Teacher for a long time. It's just a tea bag found here, Miss Maid said calmly. The servant girl said indifferently, If you like it, you can take it back later. Anyway, the whole of Britain, strictly speaking, belongs to you completely now. Her Majesty the Queen's impeccable appearance was defeated in an instant. She sighed and smiled bitterly. Miss Maid put down the teacup and then said indifferently, Well done. From the beginning to the end, it has been planned. How long did it take you to train Dagonet and Orphan? Her Majesty the Queen's gaze softened, and she said slowly, Almost 30 years? At that time, they were only as tall as this table. The first time they saw me, they called me Mother. This little guy is quite interesting. He knows how to protect people. What about today? Since we have everything under control, wouldn't it be better to get rid of Hopkins secretly and take over the Prime Minister's control of the Fianna without bloodshed? Her Majesty the Queen said thoughtfully, Because what I need is loyalty. I don't want to see a second Hopkins, and I don't want to see people who change sides at the last minute when the crisis comes. Only people with strong wills can be the real pillars of the country. Besides, if I don't let Hopkins's plan go to the end, I won't be able to take over the Knights organization. Although now, it is just a Knights organization with many things waiting to be done. Miss Maid said with a faint smile. One was later discovered by the Knights organization and finally became one of the 12 Round Table. The other was sent to study and finally became Sir Hopkins's adopted son. Then, he hid beside the Prime Minister for Sir Hopkins and secretly gained control of the Fianna. Now, everything has come to an end. The other factions of the Knight faction have either died or dispersed. The remaining ones have already pledged their loyalty to you. After obtaining these two powers, your royal authority has truly been unified. You could be considered a true king. You are really scheming. Little Elizabeth. Her Majesty the Queen regained her elegant posture and said softly, Yes, as you said before, Teacher, Elizabeth has become a bad woman. Not only has she learned to take advantage of people, but she has also learned to plot, trick, and even cruelty. A smile appeared on Miss Maid's face, and she suddenly asked, There's still one thing I don't understand. Why did that guy help you? Logically speaking, he should be the one who is tied to Hopkins by blood. Her Majesty the Queen covered her mouth and laughed. It turns out that there are things in this world that you don't know. Teacher, I always thought that you were the one who knew everything. Elizabeth. Miss Maid suddenly narrowed her eyes. Then, she stretched out her finger and gently stroked the confession on the table. Do you miss its weight? Her Majesty the Queen's face changed slightly, and then she whispered quickly, because his former wife was Margaret. Margaret? I see. Miss Maid was stunned, then nodded and showed a look of understanding. The guardian of the royal family. If so, it is really a wonderful fate. Shaking her head, it seemed that she didn't pay much attention to this kind of thing. Miss Maid regained her indifference at this time, and her eyes were indifferent. Then, why did you let me stay? Since you already have everything under control, and you don't even need my help. Did you let me stay just to watch this boring power struggle? Because you, teacher, Her Majesty the Queen whispered at this time, when you disappeared that year, you forgot to give me something. What is it? A test paper. Her Majesty the Queen put the box on her lap. I didn't know, nor did I think about whether I would have a chance to see you again before my life ended. When I saw you appear in the theater with my glasses, it was so incredible for me. Her eyes gradually became hazy. If there are miracles in the world, then I believe that meeting you again is the biggest miracle in my life for me. Teacher, did I pass the test paper I gave you? Miss Maid looked at her silently and didn't say anything. She remembered that the last time she saw her, her hair was still bright. She was silent for a while, and then she asked softly, "What is your wish?" Finally, she opened the box in her hand. While taking out the thing inside, she showed a smile with tears in her eyes. "This is the only request I will make in my life, whether this is a deal or not." What the Queen held in her hand was a crown. "Can you crown me once?" "Teacher?" Yia's eyes became soft. Looking at the old woman who raised the crown in front of her, it was as if she saw the 13-year-old girl who broke into the castle study many years ago and said that she wanted to drive her away. "Really? You have grown up, Elizabeth." She crowned her student with the crown of an emperor. Hashtag, 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 hashtag PS. 14/30. Chapter 1320. It seemed that there was nothing for them to do since Knight Bedivere left after he succeeded in the Battle of Singing. The orcs in the Fog City had calmed down and were under the control of the knights. As for the group of magicians who were temporarily formed to use the compound spell, they had also dispersed. It suddenly became deserted, which made Chung Iran and the others feel a little uncomfortable. It was probably a process where ordinary people got involved in mysterious events, participated in mysterious events, became a part of the event, suddenly solved, and finally became a loss of what to do. At this time, they sat down in a damaged bar near the street where the huge compound sound amplification was located. The guests here, including the owner and bartender of the bar, were all gone. Will found a few bottles of wine that had not been broken and put some money on the counter. Then he asked the others to move the messy tables and chairs, barely managing to piece together a complete place. Well, no matter what, in short, Will looked at his companions who were silently looking at him and smiled. "Cheers, how about it?" "Cheers." Alcohol was a very good thing for people who liked it. After drinking 2 cups of wine, even his originally dull and numb nerves began to come alive. Then, under the gradually excited atmosphere, they began to discuss what happened today. Until now, they had the time to discuss. Klein and Nick were not here. They had started to deal with the aftermath with the other knights. But Klein said that he would definitely come to Will and the others later. As for the orc girl and Olga, they followed Klein's suggestion and left. Then, what will happen to us next? In the midst of the heated discussion, such a question was suddenly raised. They suddenly fell into silence. What will happen next? Will we be dealt with? Are you an idiot? At the very least, we did contribute, okay? And look at that motorcycle rider. He doesn't look like such a heartless person. Probably maybe? Will shook his head and looked at the fear between his 2 companions. He slowly sighed. At this time, Chung Iran sat alone at the bar, as if thinking about something. Next to him was the guitar that never left his side. This should be the first time he took out this guitar. Will thought to himself. Naturally, he did not think about the nature of this guitar, but he felt that Chung Iran's ability to awaken Olga was a little mysterious. "What are you thinking about?" He came over with 2 glasses and a bottle of tequila. "Nothing." Chung Iran shook his head. I just want to be alone." "Alcohol?" Will shook the bottle. "Give me a glass." Chung Iran sighed and said with a smile, "What will happen to us next?" Will sat down. After a while, he whispered this question in a low voice. He was also thinking about this matter. But Chung Iran suddenly thought of Zhong Luochen. Before he went abroad, he signed with Zhong Luochen's company. Later, he very willfully chose to go abroad for further study. He thought that Zhong Luochen would not agree, but he did not expect that Zhong Luochen did not oppose and even gave him a large sum of money for further study. It had been a while since he contacted this nominal boss. He did not know how he was doing recently and how the thing he wanted to do was going. By the way, at that time, why did you seem to be fine? Chung Yiran suddenly looked at Will curiously and asked. At that time, Will was suddenly startled. Chung Yiran nodded. When they all became crazy, weren't you still sober? Will suddenly understood and then shook his head. I'm not very clear. At that time, my mind was also very chaotic. But I don't know why. It seemed that something suddenly calmed me down. I feel that this thing is protecting me. As he said, he took out a pendant from his pocket and placed it on the bar counter. Chung Yiran picked it up and glanced at it, and found that there was a button at the back of the pendant. So she curiously opened it. It turned out to be a small photo frame, but there was no photo inside. Actually, I opened it before, but there was no photo. Will shrugged. But Chung Yiran looked at a badge engraved inside and subconsciously said, Isn't this badge? It seems to be the badge of the royal family. Will seemed a little hesitant. As a pure citizen of the country of corruption, he naturally knew the origin of this badge. He was curious that this pendant was given to him by the orc girl as a return gift. But it should have nothing to do with the royal family, right? After all, she was an orc. He didn't know why, but it seemed to have suddenly started raining outside. The rain seemed to be washing everything in the city. The rain was even blown into the bar, and the slight mist floated to their faces, making them feel moist. Suddenly, it seemed that the whole world became quiet. Westminster Palace. The coronation ceremony didn't take long. After hearing the sound in the room, Dagonet and Orphan quickly opened the door and walked into the room. In the room, their adoptive mother, now the real Queen of Britain, sat alone in a chair and silently looked out of the window. There were 2 teacups. Dagonet couldn't help but frown. Your Majesty, let us in. Is there anything you need? Orphan was the first to speak. Her Majesty withdrew her gaze and smiled. When there are no outsiders, just call me Mother. I like it when you call me Mother. It sounds much better than the name Queen. Mother, are you worried about what will happen next? Orphan nodded and then hesitantly asked. Her Majesty shook her head, and after a moment of contemplation, she suddenly said, Dagonet, Orphan, there is something I want you to do in private. Go ahead, Dagonet said with rare seriousness. Her Majesty slowly sighed. Go and see your brother. Say hello to him for me. Also, tell him that he will continue to sit on the throne for a while. Finally, help him fix those extra nails. The 2 looked at each other and then nodded. Where's Lancelot? Her Majesty said with concern. I'm a bit worried about her. If she didn't destroy the Holy Grail, even if we were fully prepared, we might not succeed. Dagonet quickly said, she's in another room now. She needs treatment. But what about Lancelot's power? Her Majesty shook her head. About Lancelot's mysterious power, don't mention it in the future. Make it one of the most confidential information. Mother? Orphan couldn't help but be surprised. Her Majesty just smiled and said, A lady told me, as long as we pretend this never happened, we will have less trouble. A lady? The 2 couldn't help but be surprised. Was it the person the Queen saw before they came in? In one of the few rooms in the Palace of Westminster that were still intact, on the bed, covered by a pure white quilt, was the female knight, Lancelot, who had been unconscious since the destruction of the Holy Grail. Of course, there were people guarding the door. They were 2 superior knights who were lightly injured in this battle. However, what these 2 loyal knights didn't know was that in the room they were guarding, a stranger had already broken in. Miss Maid had been standing by the bed for 1 or 2 minutes. She looked at the sleeping Lancelot and seemed to be thinking about something. Suddenly, Miss Maid walked to the bedside and pressed her hand on Lancelot's forehead. A black light spot slowly merged into her body. After this, Lancelot's body began to float. A large amount of black fog gushed out from her body, and her body also disappeared bit by bit along with the black fog, until she finally disappeared. The black fog immediately began to gather again. Finally, it took shape. It was still Lancelot's appearance, but now she was dressed like a noblewoman. Her hands were folded in front of her body. After waking up, she slowly opened her eyes. Different from Lancelot's facial paralysis under normal circumstances, this her was obviously much more expressive. At the same time, it was amazing to see her amazing beauty with these subtle expressions. Long time no see, Monsieur. Her face was like a peach blossom, and she smiled. Eleanor, indeed, it has been a while. Miss Maid nodded and then said expressionlessly, Do you know why I forced you to wake up? The Duchess of Aquitaine, was puzzled at this time. As the person in charge of all the rewards and punishments of the Black Soul envoys, if you forced a black soul on vacation to wake up, it probably means that this vacation will be terminated, but I don't remember breaking the rules of vacation. So, forgive my ignorance, I really don't know. Have you forgotten what you did so quickly? Miss Maid said indifferently. Do you need me to remind you of what you did in the royal hall? Are you referring to the Holy Grail? Eleanor was surprised at this time. If my memory is not in chaos, then this Holy Grail is the owner's. Eleanor suddenly stopped and glanced at the servant girl. She chuckled and said, It was bestowed to me by the previous empress to be used in that battle, right? Since it hasn't been taken back until now, then I should still have a right to use it. In other words, even if I destroy it, I should still have the right to use it. After all, it was already given to me, wasn't it? Even if it was given to you, it still belongs to the shop. Miss Maid said expressionlessly, as the property of the shop. Even you exist as the property of the shop. Don't tell me you don't know how much extra income the Holy Grail can bring to the owner. In this way, can you still feel that you did nothing wrong? The Duchess of Aquitaine narrowed her eyes and said with a smile that was not a smile, Ah, how long have I been sleeping? Centuries. Has it been so long that you, who never cared about the profit and loss of the shop and never cared about the owner's transactions, began to care about these things? Or is it that the new owner is a little too prodigal, so there's not enough time? Miss Maid showed a gentle smile and said softly, Eleanor, I'm responsible for punishing and rewarding the Black Soul envoys. The highest limit of my authority includes extinguishing your life lamp from the Ark of the Covenant. The Duchess stopped smiling. When she looked at the servant girl, she was quite surprised. Then, she asked curiously, It seems that we have an incredible new owner in our shop. So, are you going to summon me now? Master doesn't mean that. You don't have to, Miss Maid said indifferently. Well, you obviously flirted with me before. What a heartless person. The Duchess shook her head slightly regretfully. Then, under the kind gaze of Miss Maid, she walked back to the bed and sat down. She looked up at Miss Maid and said with a smile, The loss of the Holy Grail can be deducted from my performance. If I remember correctly, I can still repay the loss of about 10 Holy Grail. If there's nothing else, then I'll continue my vacation. Miss Maid didn't say anything until now. She just looked at the Duchess lying on the bed and listened to her last words before she closed her eyes. I'm very happy to see you change after waking up temporarily. My good student, can you say hello to our new owner for me? That's just a memory of a subworld. The Duchess slowly closed her eyes. Her body turned into a black mist state and then returned to her original appearance of Lancelot. Miss Maid sighed slowly and looked at her, who had returned to the unconscious state. She walked forward and covered her with the blanket again. Well, the blanket seemed to be covering her a little too much. In the end, it even covered her head. When Her Majesty saw Lancelot covered by the white blanket when Dagonite and Ophon arrived, she was shocked. Usually, this appearance could only be seen in the morgue. Fortunately, it was just a false alarm. At this time, Dagonite's phone rang. He picked it up, grunted, and then said indifferently, Okay, I got it. Send someone to catch him. After he put down the phone, he looked at Her Majesty and said, Mother, those who were detained in the myth of Doomsday have been rescued. I got it. Her Majesty nodded and didn't seem to be worried. She just carefully tidied up the blanket for Lancelot. Oh, Dagonite, is this your prank? You won't be able to find a woman you like this. It's too ungentlemanly. It's not me. Ophon looked at Dagonite in surprise. Mr. Clown changed into a crying face. It's really not me. Fog City. in a middle-class residence. The sound of chains being forcibly broken rang out. After the chain fragments made of heimzeit fell to the ground, it made a crisp sound. In the end, it was Catherine who unlocked the chain. At this time, she rubbed her wrist and then looked at the figure in front of her with dissatisfaction. The figure was wearing a gray-black robe and a mouthless mask, guardian of the royal family. I say, how long are you going to wear this mask? Hurry up and return my handsome Caesar to me, will you? The guardian of the royal family reached out and took off the mask on his face, revealing his original appearance. Caesar. Catherine screamed at this time and directly threw herself into his arms, then comfortably rubbed his chest. After a while, she looked up and said, "How was it? My acting in the auditorium was not bad, right? I really cried. How are you going to reward me?" Caesar just rubbed her hair and gave her a smile, then looked at everyone in the room. He bowed deeply to Judas and the others, then said softly, "This time, thank you for your hard work, for my willfulness. Leader, you didn't do anything wrong." Judas smiled and said, "You have already told us what to do, so we will bear everything with you. Besides, compared to the original situation, now that the queen has real power, it is more beneficial for us." Caesar was not too pretentious. He just nodded and then said, "Tomorrow, let's go back. There should be a meeting tomorrow night. I need to appear in front of those people early. Leader, can we have a holiday?" Tipu's face was bitter, but in the next second he was directly picked up by Judas and walked out of the room. After that, Dobas nodded to Caesar and Catherine. "Then, I will go to the shop. I hope it is not badly damaged." Soon, only Kate and Catherine were left in the room. At this time, Catherine stood on tiptoe, grabbed his head with both hands, and began to fiercely kiss him. The sound of panting began to sound. After a storm, Catherine had fallen asleep. Kate stood naked in front of the bed. After covering her with a quilt, he put on his nightgown and left the room, to the study room of this house. But to his surprise, or rather his whole body tightened in an instant, he saw a person in the study room who did not belong here, standing in front of the bookcase in the study room, holding a book in his hand and looking down. He heard Caesar push the door open and came in, so he closed the book. He said with a smile, "Sorry, I have been here for a while, but it seems that it is not the right time, so I have to wait here for a while." Caesar didn't disturb anyone in the room. He just casually walked in and then gently closed the door. His pair of eyes instantly turned into a resplendent amber gold color. "I don't mean any harm. You can just treat me as a salesman," he said softly. "Besides, it is better for your body not to continuously use power that does not belong to you, Mr. Caesar, or rather, Prince Caphra." The person who appeared in front of Caesar was the mysterious young man who claimed to be a passerby that he had met in the theater. #######PS1. The next chapter will be later. Chapter 1321. Suddenly, it started to rain. The moon was bright and the stars were sparse just a while ago. Or rather, they had just experienced a thrilling, doomsday-like horror. People walked on the streets and reached out to touch the drizzle that slowly fell. While feeling the rain wetting them, they seemed to have forgotten something. Such a scene could be seen everywhere on the streets of the entire fog city and within the city. People stared blankly at the sky and the rain, and then gradually lost their minds. Old people, men, women, children, and even pets. There seemed to be something shuttling in the rain, shuttling quickly. It was a figure in a black robe. They wandered to every corner of the city, holding magic wands that could enhance magic spells, and began to wave at the destroyed buildings and streets. Such a strange scene could be seen. The collapsed buildings and the broken materials began to float up little by little, and then quickly return to their original positions. When the materials were reassembled, even if there were no cracks left, it returned to its original appearance. The damaged potholes on the streets began to be filled up. The damaged public facilities also began to gradually recover as if they were self-repairing. A special spell called Restoration Spell was used. As for the one who released the spell, it was naturally the magician team that came this time. "Hurry up. We need to repair the damaged parts of the city before sunrise." The person who commanded the magicians at this time transmitted the message to all the magicians. Don't worry about all the consumption. All the consumption of the secret crystals will be reimbursed by the Queen of Britain. Although we didn't participate in the battle this time, we have to let the British Knights see the ability of the Magician Association carefully. So, these figures shuttling through the streets and buildings sped up a little. In the streets, the secret crystals that had been used up to store magic power and turned into ordinary stones could be seen everywhere. Outside the window, it was drizzling. Occasionally, a black shadow could be seen flying in the distance. In the study, Caesar didn't really relax his tense state, but silently moved 2 steps closer. Last time was a passerby. This time it's a salesman. What will it be next time? Caesar asked expressionlessly. The mysterious young man. Boss Luo said casually, "To be honest, I don't know what it will be like the next time we meet. Maybe we won't even have the chance to meet again. Recently, I've gotten used to letting things happen naturally. Simply put, it's more up to fate." Suddenly, Caesar relaxed his body, and his tensed muscles began to relax. He slowly exhaled. "Your Excellency, you're here in the middle of the night. I don't think you're really here to promote something. I don't think I need anything." Luaccio smiled and said, "There will always be some things that you and I need. As long as there are living beings, they will always act for something. If there really isn't, then it's probably a creature like as long as I can sleep." About 4 hours ago, I received some notifications. Luaccio looked at Caesar's furrowed brows and slowly said, "The number of souls received included the souls of 1,000 pigs, to be honest. I was quite shocked." Suddenly, a thin layer of sweat appeared on Caesar's forehead. At this moment, it was as if there was a kind of darkness shrouding him. Even the whole world he saw, the darkness didn't really appear. It was just his feeling at this moment. "You're the Holy Grail?" Caesar's expression changed dramatically at this moment. "Mr. Caesar, you have a sense of humor." Luaccio smiled. "However, strictly speaking, I do have some relationship with the Holy Grail that you know. Or rather, it could be said that it's something that I recently inherited. Well, it's a bit inappropriate to say that it's something that's currently under my name. This way, it'll be easier to understand." "Yes." Caesar was silent for a while before he frowned and said, "The origin of the Holy Grail is very mysterious. The Knight mechanism has always kept it a secret. But obviously, the Holy Grail is different from the cup that contained the blood of the saints that appeared in history. You're the one who made the Holy Grail." "I'm not the one who made it." Boss Luo shook his head. "But I have the ability to make it." Boss Luo stretched out his hand, and a ball of light appeared at the center of his palm. The Holy Grail that was destroyed by Lancelot in the royal hall was now slowly being restored in front of Caesar's eyes. When the last crack on the Holy Grail disappeared, the aura that Kieran felt when he faced the Holy Grail hit him in the face once more. Luaccio casually placed the Holy Grail on the desk in the study room. Caesar slowly took a breath, and his finger quietly pointed at the floor of the study room at this moment. His only plan at this moment was to warn everyone in the room and let them leave the room as soon as possible. He had already felt the difference in power, and it was a difference that couldn't be made up at all. Once he made a move, he might not even have the chance to make a move. "Don't you like it?" Unexpectedly, just as Caesar was about to warn them, Boss Luo stretched out his hand and tapped on the Holy Grail. At this moment, the Holy Grail directly disintegrated in front of Caesar again. Restoring the Holy Grail, destroying the Holy Grail, in less than 10 seconds, was as simple as kneading a ceramic embryo with clay. What happened in front of him at this moment had already made Caesar's thoughts stagnate. Or, actually, since he entered the door, some kind of illusion magic was cast on him. But the warning that he originally intended to give was stopped because of this. We don't want to believe that what happened in front of us is beyond our understanding. Although the Holy Grail directly disintegrated under Luaccio's finger, it didn't disperse. Instead, it maintained a state of scattered particles, as if it would gather again at any time. Boss Luo continued to speak. "Just like tonight, The residents of Fog City also found it hard to believe what happened. They looked at you, and you looked at the Holy Grail. It was the same. You, why did you come to me? It wasn't that he didn't believe it. The first thing that came to his mind was that he might be under some kind of illusion magic, but it was also because of the inertia of his thoughts. In fact, he had already experienced how powerful the other party was. When he couldn't break that invisible barrier in the theater, he was already very clear about it. He didn't want to believe that the Holy Grail that was destroyed after a big battle could be so easily created and destroyed by the other party. It was also the reason why Tipu didn't want to believe that the Holy Grail was so powerful and used a defensive-type secret treasure as an explanation. But when faced with these lies and the truth, in the end, he still chose the truth that he couldn't believe. His throat was a little dry as he asked the question in his heart. I'm really just here to sell. Luaccio smiled and said, I think you might need something for what you want to do in this life. You mean the Holy Grail? After a moment of silence, Caesar couldn't help but frown. You don't want the Holy Grail. Luaccio shook his head. If you want the Holy Grail, you have too many chances to easily take it from Hopkins before he had time to make a wish to the Holy Grail. Why did you leave it until the end? Although the Holy Grail was destroyed in the process, which indeed caught the initiator of this plan, that lady and you a little off guard, but it's obvious that you want to see it destroyed. This kind of power shouldn't be left in this world, Caesar said seriously. How many Hopkins will appear again and again because of the Holy Grail? That's why I want to recommend something else to you. Luocchio smiled slowly. It's a place where the orcs behind you, and even the orcs you've been trying to help all your life, can walk openly under the sun and in front of people. What did you say? Caesar couldn't help but open his mouth. I'll let you experience it more directly. At this moment, Boss Luo smiled and then snapped his fingers in a relaxed manner. The world changed in an instant. The study room with soft orange light disappeared from Caesar's eyes in less than a blink of an eye. It was replaced by a lively and prosperous town. At this moment, he and Luaccio were standing on the city wall of this huge town. People in a hurry, streets in the style of the middle world, and all kinds of women, either wearing all kinds of strange armor or holding staffs in their hands, dressed like mages in fantasy. There were also beautiful people who carried bows and arrows on their backs, like the legendary elves in the legends. There were even orcs who were either rough or petite, with obvious beastly characteristics, walking normally on the streets and casually chatting with others. This place. Caesar looked at everything in front of him emotionally. Among all kinds of people, there were demi-humans, and even orcs, the legendary elves. They walked freely on the streets. They chatted and laughed, talking about all kinds of topics. And humans, they didn't mean to hide themselves. For him, at this moment, it was as if he had come to the legendary Eden. Welcome to the town of origin. Luaccio's voice sounded softly in Caesar's ears. I named this world Izu Grand World. This is a fantasy-style world, a real world created by me. In this place, even the orcs won't be suppressed or excluded, and humans won't be afraid of the orcs' existence. On the contrary, the orcs are a very popular race in the team here. Here, even a kingdom belonging to the orcs has begun to appear. Under the vast and almost infinite clear blue sky, a cool breeze swept over the city wall and blew Caesar's hair. He subconsciously put his hands on the fence of the city wall and looked down at everything below. I think compared to what Mr. Caesar has been secretly doing all this time, what you want to achieve and change the current situation of the orc society may be more suitable here, Luaccio said softly, so I intend to sell it to you. Of course, the only drawback here is there's no such thing as the internet for the time being, and the living standards vary according to different areas. The most advanced is probably the 40s and 50s of the last century. In addition, there is a slight suspicion of escape here. But even if it's an escape, it's enough. Caesar turned around. It's really an irresistible promotion. It seemed that he had gone through a long journey. When he came back again, only 10 minutes had passed. The so-called salesman had left the study and left the room. And what he left for Caesar was only a certificate that allowed him to freely go to the Izu Grand World. Only those with orc blood could enter that world through it. First, you need to explain the situation of this world to every orc. Second, whether to go or not. It's not allowed to be decided by force. It needs to be decided by the orcs themselves. If you agree, go. If you don't, please eliminate everything you see. Third, you have a chance to show the Izu Grand World to each orc you choose. But at the same time, once an orc enters this world, he can't return here again. Fourth, once you die in this world, your soul will belong to me. And the words that he left behind. Izu Grand World, a world where we can live under the sun. Caesar sat at the desk, silently clenching the certificate in his hand, and fell into deep thought. The rain outside hadn't stopped yet. He was very clear about the effect of the rain. This was a spell called Memory Erasure, jointly released by the magician troupe. It would make the residents who had experienced the Fog City incident selectively forget about the orcs and all supernatural things. This was also the countermeasure that he had prepared at the beginning when he and the queen planned this action. Suddenly, Caesar felt that he seemed to have done something that wasted his energy all these years. A deep sense of fatigue quietly came over him in front of the certificate in his hand. He even had an impulse to go out and take a shower from the rain falling from the sky. But this level of memory erasure spell couldn't have an effect on the inhuman. Yes, even the weakest inhuman couldn't have an effect on it. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. It wasn't the voice of Judas, Tipu, or even Catherine. It was the voice of an old woman. It was the voice of a maid who had been in charge of the daily cleaning in this room. The voice of the most ordinary human. Mr. Davis, are you in there? Can I come in? Caesar slowly exhaled at this time. Then his body and even his appearance began to age at this time. He was no longer handsome like a prince, but an ordinary man in his 40s. With the voice of this age, Caesar said slowly, "It's me. Come in." The maid pushed the door and came in. After seeing that it was really the owner of the house, Mr. Davis, she was relieved and then said, "I seem to hear a sound here, so I came to have a look, afraid that it was a thief." "It's okay. I'm looking at the documents," Caesar said indifferently. "In addition, I'll end my vacation tomorrow and set off for Northern Ireland. Please take care of this place." "This is my job. I'll take good care of this house," the maid said respectfully. She could not take care of it because this house was bought by Mr. Davis, the chief minister of Northern Ireland, in Fog City for his holidays. She had worked here for more than 10 years. The Palace of Westminster was the first place to be repaired. On the sightseeing floor of the giant clock called the Clock Tower of the Palace of Westminster, Luaccio was overlooking the city that was being repaired bit by bit. Suddenly, he opened his mouth and said, "The city is like a giant clock that is constantly turning. Everyone who lived here was a small part of it. Everyone has a role that can't be ignored. In this inhuman event, even ordinary people can play their role. It's a very fulfilling night, don't you think so?" Boss Luo turned around. Behind him, Miss Maid walked slowly. "Master, it seems that you had a good time tonight. After all this time, I was a good audience." Luaccio smiled. "How was it with your student? It felt like I was fooled by a naughty student?" Miss Maid smiled faintly, but there was a rare gentleness in her eyes for outsiders. "It should be a good time." Luaccio smiled, and then opened his palm. A colorful flower began to emerge from his palm. "For you, the legendary pansy." Miss Maid naturally recognized it at a glance. "Yes, although it's just a legend." Luaccio handed the flower to Miss Maid. "But it's good to turn the legend into reality." It was a real flower that naturally grew in violation of the law of nature. It was just that the time from creation to growth was accelerated. Keeping the pansy flower in front of her chest, Miss Maid lowered her head and smiled. Soon after, she looked up. "Master, regarding the punishment for the destruction of the Holy Grail this time, the punishment has been issued. Eleanor has tactfully requested for compensation." "She?" Luaccio nodded. "When I checked the account book, she seemed to be your former maid. Do you want to increase her fine?" Miss Maid said indifferently, "I think you should increase it. You can immediately stop her vacation and let her return to work." Luaccio just smiled. Although I haven't seen her personally, she was a senior who taught you for a period of time. I'll let it go this time. Besides, in the palm of his hand, the Holy Grail in a free state appeared and gathered together again. Luocchio said casually, when the previous owner created this thing, it came with a self-healing ability. Since it's back, there's no problem. But it's a bit inappropriate to let it stay here. Master, are you going to put it back in the storage room? Miss Maid asked curiously. Let me think. Boss Luo pondered for a while, and then an idea came to him. He waved his hand and opened a door. The critical door. Boss Luo threw the Holy Grail in and said the subworld is random. It will come with its own legend, and then it will be fought for. Why don't we call it the Holy Grail War? Miss Maid's gaze remained unchanged. Anyway, as long as the master was happy. Luocchio suddenly said, by the way, the doomsday myth will disappear from this world little by little until it's completely erased. In this way, you don't have to stand on the dictionary as punishment. The rain stopped. The boss and the maid accompanied each other on the central tower until dawn. When the city was completely restored, the first ray of light began to move toward them from the end of the horizon. The pansy in her hand was bathed in the morning light and was dazzling. Hashtag PS 15/30. Chapter 1322. After the city was repaired, there were no real scars left behind. The effect of the elimination spell was much better than expected. Of course, what happened in Fog City had already been published in the magic newspaper created by the Magician Association. In the dynamic newspaper headlines, there were even many scenes of the fierce battle that happened in Fog City last night. The vortex of discussion had quietly rolled up in the countries of Eurasia. In the Platinum Palace, it was already 9 o'clock the next morning. Her Majesty the Queen, accompanied by Dagonet and Orphan, received the leader of the magician team, Deacon Ace. Mr. Ace, this is your Holy Lance. Please check that it is intact. Inside the box was the Holy Lance used by the Royal Guardian last night to defeat Hopkins. It was held by Dagonet. Deacon Ace's palm just casually swept over the box and smiled. I believe that Her Majesty the Queen is a respectable person who will keep her promise. The Queen said indifferently, about the cost of repairing Fog City, please make a detailed list. After verifying that there is no mistake, I will send someone to personally send it to your association. Then, about the mineral deposits in the Northeast? Deacon Ace narrowed his eyes. He was more like a shrewd businessman than a magician. This was actually the most important thing. There were several exclusive materials in Britain. About this part of the matter, I will personally discuss it with the people in your association later, the Queen said with a smile. The deacon didn't say much. After nodding, he left with the Holy Lance. As for how the two sides would argue about the mineral deposits, it was a matter for the higher-ups. After Ace left, Her Majesty the Queen met with Gareth, Tresty, and Bedivere separately. The last person she met was Mr. Gareth. Before the duel last night, they had already pledged allegiance to the current royal family. No, to be precise, they only pledged allegiance to the current queen and not to the current British royal family. Before this group of people at the round table pledged their allegiance, they actually left some room for maneuver. Gareth thought about the Queen's intention of meeting with the three of them alone. Unexpectedly, Her Majesty the Queen was very direct. What? At this moment, Mr. Gareth's face was full of disbelief. You want me to take over the night mechanism of Fog City? Tresty and Bedivere have already agreed to take over their respective night organizations. Her Majesty said seriously, You're the only one left, Gareth. Gareth frowned and said hesitantly, Your Majesty, there has never been a precedent in history for a Knight of the Round Table to take over an organization. The Queen said, If there is no such example, then it can appear in the future. Gareth, are you willing to see the British knighthood once again fall into the hands of people like Sir Hopkins? Are you going to let me re-elect the Grand Secretary and then command you? Or do you not have the confidence to do a good job, Gareth? That's not what I mean. Mr. Gareth shook his head. At this time, he naturally understood the intention of letting the 12 who had already pledged their loyalty to each take over different knight mechanisms. For knights of the Round Table who had inherited the power of inheritance like them, once they had made an oath, they would not betray the queen. Letting them take over the knightly organization was equivalent to consolidating Her Majesty's control over the knightly organization. I just don't understand. Why me? Gareth smiled bitterly and said, to be honest, I didn't play much of a role in the whole thing. I wasn't like Lancelot who destroyed the Holy Grail, and I wasn't like Dagonet who carried out the undercover work. Gareth, Her Majesty smiled at this time. I originally intended to let Dagonet take over the knightly organization of Fog City, but he recommended you to me. Dagonet recommended me? Ignoring Gareth's surprise at this time, Her Majesty directly signed a document. Gareth, I have written the document of your appointment. I hope that your future work will make me feel that this recommendation will not disappoint. Are you still planning to not take it? What else could he say? The document was already written. Taking a deep breath, Gareth cautiously took the appointment. Then, the matter of discussing how to rebuild the knightly organization will be temporarily handed over to you, Tresty, and Bedivere to coordinate. I believe that if the three of you can work together, there will be a very good start, right? I will do my best. After saluting, Gareth took the mission document and left the Queen's office, feeling a little unreal. As soon as he came out, he let out a long sigh. Her Majesty seemed to be a completely different person from before. He even felt more reserved when facing her than when facing Sir Hopkins. But at this time, he saw that outside the corridor, someone was leaning against the wall as if waiting for him to come out. The clown, Dagonet. Gareth was silent for a while and finally walked to Dagonet. He hesitated and said, before I came here, I went back to Hopkins Manor. I found Geraint, a few cabinet elders, and others in the place where the prisoners were held. They didn't die at all. Mr. Clown narrowed his eyes at this time. Even if you found them, except for Geraint and some of the knights, those cabinet elders won't be released. Of course, it's the same for their loyal ones. Her Majesty won't so easily return the situation that has already been opened to those old guys again. They will spend the next few days leisurely. Why? Gareth lowered his head. Dagonet was startled. Then he shrugged and said, are you talking about recommending you to take over the Knights of Fog City? Didn't I say, Gareth, you're more suitable for these trivial things than me. Are you going to let me sit in the office and sign documents? Maybe my signature will be different every time. Gareth grabbed Dagonet's collar with one hand and pulled him in front of himself. I say, why did you lie to me that you killed so many people? Killed Geraint? Did I lie to you? Mr. Clown had a fearful expression on his face. I remember reminding you about this. Gareth couldn't help but be startled. Mr. Clown shook his head. I say, Gareth, can you have some confidence in me? I made a knight's oath in front of King Arthur's statue. I said this sentence, didn't I? Who knew you were referring to this at that time? Gareth pinched Dagonet's neck with both hands and was furious. Mr. Clown looked like he was about to suffocate. But he suddenly let go of his hand, looked at Dagonet, who couldn't stop coughing, and sighed, it's not you, it's really great. Gareth, Mr. Clown suddenly put on a bright smile and said slyly, are you feeling very guilty towards me? Are you blaming yourself for not trusting your companions? It's okay, for the next year, you can contribute your salary to me. So my wounded heart will be well healed. Get out. Mr. Gareth strode away. Half a year? Mr. Clown hurriedly chased after him and hooked his shoulder. Get out. 3 months? Go to hell. 1 month, okay? I'm running out of flying knives recently. The voices gradually faded away from the corridor. When Her Majesty came out of the office, she only saw the backs of the 2 people before they disappeared. At this time, a servant came to Her Majesty and told her that Lancelot had woken up. Later, Lancelot was transferred to Platinum Palace for treatment. When Her Majesty walked into the room, Lancelot was sitting on the bed silently, looking at her hands, seeming to be absent-minded. My queen, hearing the sound, she immediately wanted to get down from the bed. Her Majesty waved her hand and said with a smile, I'm not stupid enough to let a patient bow to me. No, Lancelot hurriedly said, "You're the wisest queen I've ever seen. I've heard about what happened yesterday. I didn't expect so many things to happen, and I've been kept in the dark. I'm sorry. I didn't do anything, and even let someone take away my holy seal. I don't deserve the name Lancelot du Lake anymore." Her Majesty came to the bedside and sat down, suddenly saying, "Do you remember what I said to you when you and I were trapped in the stone room?" Lancelot nodded subconsciously. Her Majesty said, "Now, my hands have been released from your eyes, and the light has come. Don't you want to prepare yourself?" Lancelot moved her lips and whispered, "But now I'm all ready. This is what the Guardian found from Oberon's body after eliminating him." Her Majesty handed a box to Lancelot. "I think it belongs to you." When the box was opened, a soft light shone on Lancelot's face. It was the Holy Seal of Lancelot du Lake. Lancelot lowered her head and stared blankly at the Holy Seal floating in the air, and then it automatically integrated into her body little by little. She was originally the rightful inheritor of this power. When the disrupted inheritance rights were restored to the right track, the Holy Seal obeyed the ancient oath and returned to her body again. Am I still qualified?" Lancelot muttered to herself, but she suddenly felt something pressing down on her head. She opened her mouth in surprise. The thing pressing down on her head was a book. It was the book put down by Her Majesty. Her Majesty squinted her eyes and smiled. "If you still can't forgive yourself, why don't you try to punish yourself? Hold this book and don't let it fall down for a whole day. If you fail, you have to eat 100 strawberry sundaes within an hour. What do you think?" "I'll do it." Lancelot took a deep breath. She carefully got down from the bed and looked at the book on top of her head. If it was only balancing, it was not too difficult for her to do so with the training she had been doing all this time. By the way, stand up straight. You have to be like a lady. Remember, you're a lady now, not a knight. Her Majesty said with a smile, "Don't be so tense, relax." "Yes, relax a little more." Is that so?" Lancelot couldn't help feeling a little unnatural. "Well, it's almost done." Her Majesty smiled and looked at Lancelot's standing posture with satisfaction. Then she suddenly said, "By the way, Lancelot, are you interested in being my student?" "Huh." Because it was too sudden, the book that had been balanced very well fell from Lancelot's head, just like that. It seems that the chefs have to work overtime. Her Majesty suddenly covered her mouth and laughed. When Mr. Davis, led by the guard, came to the Queen's office, he was a little surprised to see a woman in a white tuxedo shirt with a book called Confession on her head. "Mr. Davis, Her Majesty is waiting for you inside. Please come in," Lancelot said expressionlessly. "I remember your name is Lancelot?" Mr. Davis nodded. "Yes." Lancelot didn't nod. She just blinked. "Last year, when the Queen visited Northern Ireland, we met once at a local banquet. So you still remember?" Mr. Davis nodded and then smiled. "Thank you for your hard work during this period." Lancelot was a little surprised, but her expression was as usual. After Davis walked into the Queen's office, she continued to stand in front of the door and perform her guard duty. In the room, Her Majesty personally made a pot of tea for Davis. They looked at each other for a while in the discussion area next to the office. "I'm leaving at noon. I have a meeting in the afternoon." "Mr. Davis," Caesar said slowly at this time, "you took a long leave this time. Actually, you can continue to stay for a while." Her Majesty said slowly, "The previous Prime Minister is dead. I need someone to help me." Caesar said indifferently, "Elizabeth, I've been operating in Northern Ireland for more than 10 years. Over the years, I've been secretly arranging for the orcs to live there with new identities. In fact, it's enough. You should understand that I have little interest in the so-called power of the British government." "That's a pity." The Queen laughed bitterly. "I know I can't make you stay by my side. It's already beyond my expectations that you're willing to help me this time. In fact, at first, I didn't even think that you would agree to help me. After all, some orcs need to be sacrificed this time, but I need this effect." Caesar said expressionlessly, "The incident in Fog City has begun to spread among the non-humans in Eurasia. In the next period of time, the anti-orc voices will intensify again. The living environment of the orcs on Eurasia will become more difficult. Only in this way will they have the courage to find new opportunities. Elizabeth, do you know? There are at least 740,000 orcs in the world now. But I've only settled 30,000 in Northern Ireland so far. They still don't have the courage to take this step. Her Majesty shook her head. If there's a need, please don't hesitate. If you need political support, I'll do my best. Thank you. Caesar nodded directly without being too pretentious, then stood up. Then, I'll take my leave. If I'm not wrong, you should go to the Magician Association to negotiate with them in person, right? When the time comes, the guardian of the royal family will appear by your side again. You're always so reassuring. Her Majesty sighed. No wonder Margaret loves you so much. After a moment of silence, Caesar said, I'm leaving. Take care of yourself. Her Majesty suddenly said, Caesar, can I see Margaret's 2 children? After all, they're my nephews. You'll see them soon, probably. At noon, accompanied by Miss Maid, Luocio came to the door of a small shop that looked quite secretive. This place was found according to the address given by a certain lady. Lady Maria's Magic House. Genius memorized this address in 1 second. Mobile version of reading website. M. Chapter 1323. When the magician troupe went to Britain, the route was rather secretive in order not to attract attention. Naturally, the transportation they chose was not very comfortable. For these magicians, such a journey was naturally disdainful. But it was different when they returned. Since they had completed their work, they naturally wouldn't choose those narrow and bumpy tools. The Queen specially booked a whole plane for them, and the person in charge of sending them off this time was Mr. Bedivere, who had just become the head of Edinburgh's night organization a few hours ago. He was chatting with Deacon Ace in the car. Pansy. When he heard this name, Deacon Ace's expression was obviously a little unnatural. He frowned and muttered, Mr. Bedivere, why did you suddenly mention this name? Bedivere was familiar with most of the famous magicians in the British Empire, but he was unfamiliar with the couple he met last night, even though they claimed to be freelance magicians. After that, Bedivere suddenly remembered something. That was from the beginning to the end. No one knew the name of the mysterious young man who injected a huge amount of magic into the compound spell. It was as if no one had ever thought of this question. As for the pansy, he only knew about it from Klein's introduction at the beginning. Later, after a simple conversation with Klein, Bedivere found out that it was indeed Klein's first time meeting this man and woman. Yes, I only heard of this name by chance, so I was a little curious. Bedivere said slowly. Mr. Ace seems to know the owner of this name. Deacon Ace shook his head and looked at the new head of Edinburgh's night organization with suspicion. There is actually nothing to hide about the pansy. As long as you ask around, it is very easy to find out from the magic world. Have you heard of the title, Legendary Witch? Bedivere was startled and said, Could it be that the pansy is this legendary witch? I have heard of this legend. One of the few top secret pharmacists in the world, and she is also free. Legend has it that when she was certified as a secret apothecary, she solved a problem that had existed for centuries in the history of secret apothecaries in a single day and successfully created a perfect 6-star potion. Thus, on the day she completed her certification, she was given the certificate of the highest level of secret apothecary. Later on, because of her temperament, she was called the Legendary Witch. Most people know about this, and the title of Legendary Witch is much more widespread than her original name. Deacon Ace nodded and said, But if you're a secret pharmacist, you would know the name Heptagon. However, she has been missing for more than 30 years. It's normal that Mr. Bedivere doesn't know about her. Bedivere asked, Mr. Ace, have you seen this Legendary Witch? Deacon Ace shook his head as if he was at a loss for words. He sighed and said, If possible, I would rather have never seen it. Really, Mr. Bedivere, I advise you to not get involved with a legendary witch. Otherwise, you will regret it for the rest of your life. Bedivere couldn't help but frown. However, Deacon Ace sighed. Let me show you something. With that, Deacon Ace slowly lifted his clothes, revealing his abdomen and chest. Bedivere's expression couldn't help but change slightly. Your body, as a surgeon, Bedivere found it hard to imagine what he was seeing, because the part below Deacon Ace's neck couldn't be called a human body at all. Instead, it was directly made with various instruments, surgical engravings, artificial organs, and crystals. Although all the parts could be seen that they were arranged to imitate the internal organs of the human body very well, this is my current body. Deacon Ace smiled bitterly and said, "Now, these organs and their annual maintenance cost is a huge consumption. The reason why my body became like this is only because I once used my body to exchange for a bottle of potion from the legendary witch. To be honest, I actually regret my original choice." "Why did she take away your body?" Bedivere asked, puzzled. Mr. Ace shook his head. "Instead of saying why she took away my body, it's better to say among the price of asking her to help, this is the only thing I can afford. So, it's best not to get involved with the legendary witch, because you will always be unable to resist the temptation she brings to you. Then, you will lose it, and you will even regret it in the future." Bedivere suddenly asked, "What does this legendary witch look like?" Deacon Ace gave him a strange look. Bedivere said calmly, "If we don't know the appearance of such a dangerous person, it will make people feel uneasy. No one knows what she looks like." Deacon Ace said, "Because she never shows her true face. So, no one can find her in the 30 years she has been missing. Perhaps she is by your side, but you and I never know." Bedivere nodded, but he was thinking about something else. However, Klein's words couldn't prove that the pansy he mentioned was the legendary witch. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a good thing to have such a dangerous person in Britain. It didn't take long for the car to arrive at the airport. After personally sending all the members of the magician troupe onto the plane and watching the plane take off and disappear, Bedivere left the airport. Maria Holick, the name of the magic house in front of him, gave him the feeling when he first met the club. Of course, the nature was naturally completely different. The only similarity was probably that they were both opened on the busy road. In addition, only Inhumans could see through the disguise on the surface. In fact, it was a laundry in a relatively quiet place on this busy road. It was a little different from last night. When Luaccio and Miss Maid walked into the laundry, Ms. Maria was holding a large pile of clothes to be dry cleaned. As for the laundry area, there was only a middle-aged woman sitting and reading a magazine, waiting to take out the clothes in the washing machine. Today, Ms. Maria was wearing a work apron. Compared to last night's slightly dusty appearance, she seemed to be younger. Perhaps it was because the makeup she wore last night was more mature. She looked like a different person. "You are." When Maria saw Luaccio, she was stunned at first, and then said, "Are you two going to wash clothes?" Luaccio only felt a little strange. At this time, Maria didn't seem to know him. But he didn't remember that he had erased his existence from her perception. The rain of elimination spell before dawn shouldn't have made her lose this part of her memory. But the doubt only lasted for a moment. Luaccio quickly smiled and said, "We are here to see Ms. Maria. If it's convenient, can you please let her come out? By the way, how should I address you?" "Looking for my sister?" Ms. Maria, in front of him, frowned. Luaccio took out a card. After taking a look at the card, she said with a look of realization, "Are your guests? I don't think I have seen you before." "You can say that I just met her," Luaccio said casually. "So, are you in a hurry?" "If you're not in a hurry." She nodded. Then her eyes fell on the woman in the laundry area and said with some embarrassment, "This lady is a regular customer of mine." "It's okay." Luaccio smiled. "In this case, can you two go inside and wait for a while?" She said, pointing to a door leading inside, indicating that they could go in directly. "I'll be there soon." After a while, after the laundry customer took the clothes, she directly hung a sign on the door of the laundry shop, and then came to Luaccio and Miss Maid. The laundry shop was connected to the living place about half of the space. The living place was a bit simple, but relatively clean. Miss Maid seemed to be more satisfied with this environment. It was rare that she didn't wipe the chair before her master sat down. "My sister just came back this morning and then fell asleep. She seemed a little tired. She didn't tell me that there would be new guests coming to see her. Maybe she was too tired and forgot." She served tea and then quickly said, "Please wait a moment, I'll call her." She's about to wake up. It was a rather magical scene. Ms. Maria sat down, and then her head suddenly dropped. When she looked up again, she yawned and stretched. Her big breasts supported the apron on her body, which could bring vitality to people. Then she showed a slightly frivolous smile. This was the witch Luaccio met, Maria. Sorry. I was too tired when I came back this morning. I didn't think about anything and fell asleep directly. I didn't have time to tell her that you came back. Ms. Maria looked bitter at this time. And little brother, you suddenly disappeared again. I thought I was being molested. Why does the air suddenly seem to be colder? Ms. Maria suddenly shivered, but she couldn't find the source. The two people in front of her, well, they are boys with such a healing smile. As for the woman next to them, she also has a kind look. So strange. Did someone secretly cast a bad spell on me? While she was thinking, she heard Luaccio ask curiously, Ms. Maria, are you sharing a body with your sister? Because of some reasons, I can only live in Teresa's body temporarily, Maria said rather casually. Oh, by the way, Teresa is this child's name. Let's not talk about this for now. Is this the legendary witch Heptil? Legendary witch? Boss Luo looked at his maid-cum-girlfriend and blinked. Ms. Maid said indifferently, probably some busybodies made it up when they were bored. I have never admitted it. I feel like I know more about you. Luaccio smiled. Ms. Maid looked at him, and her eyes suddenly softened. So dazzling, Ms. Maria, who felt like she was about to be blinded by the dazzling light, suddenly felt hurt. She coughed lightly and said seriously, Gentlemen, why don't we talk in my magic house first? No matter what, it's not suitable to talk here. As she spoke, she knocked on the table, and a small magic wand about a foot long, like a conductor's baton, appeared in her palm. Then, she lightly tapped on one of the walls of the house with this magic wand. On the white wall, painted with latex paint, neat cracks appeared in an instant. It was the common pattern of the eye-shaped bricks. Then, the bricks on the wall began to fold in a regular pattern. Finally, what appeared in front of them was an oval entrance. Maria walked in first. Come in. Welcome to Maria Holick. Guests. It was a bit like walking into a haunted house, but there was no strange smell. On the contrary, there was a light lavender fragrance in the air. It wasn't big, about 60 square meters. The surroundings were messy, but in fact, there were all kinds of strange objects and even creatures neatly placed. For example, a frog with slick back hair and a cigar in its mouth. On the wall, there was a ribbon-shaped fish pond. A purple oncong fish was swimming slowly, opening its mouth from time to time to suck in the surrounding microorganisms. By the way, this oncong fish emitted a green light. It was a bit like a tourist entering an aquarium for the first time. Before Boss Luo sat down, he actually spent some time observing the strange things here. Meanwhile, the servant girl was carefully explaining the things here to her master. Her level of detail made Ms. Maria, who was about to show off her skills as a merchant in the magic house, feel a sense of defeat. Then, let me formally introduce myself. Maria coughed lightly again. I'm Maria, a freelance magic merchant. It's nice to meet you too. Especially, I can see the legendary Pansy. It's really an honor. Although she said that, in fact, this witch was very nervous. After all, she was facing the legendary witch. You must hold on, Maria. You must not let the legendary witch look down on you. Smile naturally. Don't be nervous. Ms. Maria, do you feel hot? Yes, I suddenly feel a bit hot. It's so hot, don't you think? Ha ha! Maria laughed, then pulled open her collar and fanned herself. Her rather deep cleavage was revealed again. Then, this witch instantly felt as if she had entered the South Pole. A chill rushed from the soles of her feet to the top of her head, and then from the top of her head to the soles of her feet, circulating back and forth several times. Achoo! The two people in front of her, well, they were still boys with such a healing smile. As for the legendary witch beside them, she still had a kind gaze. So strange? Chapter 13:24. Miss Maria, let's get to the point. Miss Maid suddenly said, I heard that you're going to buy my potions, right? Before coming here, Miss Maid had already heard the general situation from her master. So, she naturally got Luacio's permission to speak at this time. Otherwise, with her usual style, she wouldn't have spoken before Luacio spoke. And Boss Luo wanted to see how she dealt with magicians when she was a pharmacist. Hearing that, Maria was suddenly energized. Strangely, the chill came and went quickly. But this didn't mean that she could enter into the negotiation mode immediately. She didn't even think that the legendary, which could get to the point so easily. She even thought that both sides would need some time to beat around the bush. But considering the rumors about the legendary witch, she was moody and acted strangely, so it was understandable. Yes, Master Pansy. Master. This was the name given to the magicians at the top of the pyramid in the magic circle. After all, secret potions were also a branch of magic. There were only a few top secret potioneers in the world, so it wasn't rude to call them master. Then, you should know my rules, Miss Maid said calmly. Maria nodded at this time, and then said nervously, I'll provide the materials, and it's double. In addition, I need to agree to Master's request. If the first request can't be fulfilled, then I'll need to add another double, with different requests. If the additional double request can't be fulfilled, then it will become Master's private property. If I remember correctly, this should be it? Mademoiselle Maria knows very well. The servant girl smiled, and her smile was like an angel's. Of course. Maria suddenly became very energetic. I'm a big fan of Master. I've read all the legends about you. I can recite them backwards. You're my idol for life, okay? She was a super rich woman who could sell a bottle of secret potions for 300,000 secret crystals, and she was the richest woman in the magic circle for many years. But I have a new rule now. Miss Maid smiled like an angel. New rules? Maria's expression immediately darkened. The servant girl smiled and took out a craft paper bag, the kind used to store bread when buying bread. Then she poked 2 holes in it and said with a smile, I'm now used to letting the client wear this mask to talk to me until the commission is completed. Maria was stunned at first. Then she looked as if she had seen a ghost. Miss Maid's angelic smile became more and more charming as she held the newly made cover. Ah, this little thing looks really unique. Maria let out a hollow laugh and gulped. She then took the craft paper bag. Isn't it just for carrying this thing? By the way, you can't take it off before the commission is completed. Miss Maid said softly, no matter when you are eating, bathing, or sleeping. I have never been able to take it off. Are you a devil? The commission, do you still want to continue? The servant girl asked with a smile. Maria took a deep breath as if she had made a major decision. She gritted her teeth and put the paper bag over her head. No matter what kind of beauty she was before, she was only left with a pair of eyes at this moment. It was greasy, and there were breadcrumbs inside. This is too much. Master Hepton, are you satisfied now? Maria asked in a stiff tone. Miss Maid said expressionlessly, Okay, Miss Maria, we can continue to talk about this secret medicine. The rules are still the same as before. Your request will be customized according to your commission. Can you remove the surname mask? Maria asked with grief and indignation. Miss Maid, who had learned the Luaccio style of ignoring from her master, said softly, Miss Maria, what's the commission about? After all, they had really gotten to the point. Maria had no choice but to convince herself not to mind the current situation. Although the greasy paper bag was really uncomfortable, she took a deep breath and inhaled the breadcrumbs in her nose. However, she couldn't take off the paper bag. She could only endure the discomfort and said, I want to ask the master to make a fertility potion. Fertility potion? Miss Maid opened her mouth slightly in surprise. Then, she turned her head to look at Maria and said calmly, Logically speaking, you should still have the ability to reproduce. Besides, even if you have some hidden illness, according to the current development of secret medicine, isn't the fertility potion a very common thing? Why did you specially ask me to make it? Because I need the fertility potion to be able to work on the giant dragon. Maria's voice sounded a bit low, probably because of the paper bag. Master Pansy should know this, right? Giant dragons had a very strong resistance to magic. They were basically immune to secret potions of 4 stars and below, while secret potions of 5 stars would also have most of their effects nullified. Only secret potions of 6 stars and above could, in theory, have an effect on giant dragons. In fact, the fertility potion of the secret medicine has never exceeded 4 star. I wonder if Master Pansy can make a perfect 6-star fertility potion. You didn't say anything, as if she was thinking about something. Boss Luo rested his chin on his hand and watched the changes in Miss Maid's expression without saying anything. As time passed, Maria was so nervous that she was about to lose all hope. Clearly, she also felt that even the Heptalus couldn't make a perfect 6-star fertility potion. After all, even the 2 masters in the secret art tower who were on the same level as the Heptalus said that 5-star was the limit of the fertility potion, and it was impossible to improve it. She only came to her to give a try. Finally, Miss Maid said, "As far as I know, there aren't many giant dragons in this world. The fertility potion you want me to make is for that person. Does it matter?" Maria froze for a second. Yi said calmly, "There are differences among the giant dragons' physiques. If you don't know which type it is, you can't make the most accurate comparison. Or you just need a bottle of perfect 6-star fertility potion, and you don't care if it works or not. It doesn't matter. The price. Relatively speaking, the requirement may be simpler." Maria said subconsciously, "Prescribing the right medicine? I understand. What? Can you really make it? Which giant dragon is it?" Miss Maid asked directly. Maria took a deep breath. She gave up taking a deep breath and said quickly, "Fafnir." Luocio asked curiously, "Fafnir? There really is one. However, this legendary giant dragon seems to have been killed in the myths, right?" Maria looked at Luocio. She felt as if she had been healed. Then she explained, "Little brother, the dragon you mentioned was indeed slaughtered, Achu. The present one is actually its descendant and the only adult golden dragon left in the world. But for some reason, it lost the ability to reproduce. Now, the magic creature department is racking their brains on this matter, but they can't do anything about it. Fafnir's fertility problem has become a century-old problem in the magic world. If Fafnir can't reproduce, then it is very likely that the golden dragon species will be completely extinct from the world." So, Boss Luo blinked. It turns out that these legendary creatures also have various problems. "Is it strange?" Maria said naturally. "Because of the unadaptability to environmental changes, not to mention the magic creatures, even ordinary creatures are directly extinct every year. According to the statistics of the magic world, 2 to 3 kinds of creatures will disappear every year. Little brother, Achu, don't you watch the news?" Luocio thought for a while and said, "I haven't watched it for a while." He remembered that when he was in South America, the vampire prince once gave him a creature similar to a postman, but it had been shelved for a while. But he still quite agreed with the dynamic newspaper established by the Magician Association. "Miss Maria, it seems that the Magician Association should offer a large reward for solving this problem." Miss Maid suddenly narrowed her eyes. Maria said at this time, "Master shouldn't be interested in these bounties. After all, if you were, you would have taken action earlier. Compared to these bounties, what I know is that you seem to prefer the client to complete your request. So what is your request?" Miss Maid said, "So your request is to solve Fafnir's fertility problem, not the fertility potion. After all, from your description, we can't determine the specific reason for Fafnir's fertility problem. Isn't it over if it can give birth? Who cares what kind of hidden disease it is?" Maria said subconsciously. However, she suddenly remembered that the legendary, which seemed to be a perfectionist. So she hurriedly changed her words. "Of course, if it can completely solve Fafnir's fertility problem, of course, it will be the best." "Then you go and prepare, Miss Mask." Miss Maid nodded directly. "You should have the coordinates here, right?" This time, she even omitted the name. "This is too much." "Maria," she sighed, nodded, then stood up and said, "Then I'll go and prepare now. Please wait here for a while." Watching Maria walk into the room further inside the magic house, Luocio asked curiously, "When did you buy the bread?" "Before going abroad." Miss Maid smiled and said, "Master, Have you forgotten? Didn't we go to a bakery together the day before? Really? Luocio smiled and immediately asked curiously, the coordinates you mentioned just now? Miss Maid said, it's a common non-human realm in Europe and even the entire Western world. Or should I say it's a space for activities? The specific structure is a world fragment. If you're in it, you don't have to worry about using non-human power. Luocio was even more curious. If that's the case, why don't non-human people choose to live in it all the time? It shouldn't be much different from the real world, right? It's not the same. Miss Maid explained, a lot of energy is needed to maintain this realm, and the Magician Association is the organization that manages this realm. So every non-human who stays in the realm needs to pay a certain amount of secret crystals according to the length of time to maintain the daily consumption of this realm. But if you live in the real world, as long as you don't expose yourself, there won't be any problems in this regard. Therefore, for the lower and middle-class non-humans, it's more economical to stay in the real world. Of course, there are naturally more rules to abide by in the real world. While speaking, Maria had walked out again and said, sorry for the long wait. The coordinates are ready. Please come with me. But can I ask you two for a favor? Please go ahead, Luocio said casually. Maria said seriously, you also know that the relationship between Britain and Europe is not very harmonious. Last year, the Magician Association closed all the official coordinates in Britain, which is a kind of sanction. So, we won't tell anyone, Miss Maria. Don't worry. Luocio nodded. Then come with me. Maria turned around and walked to a fireplace. Then, she took out a bag and sprinkled a pile of green powder into the fireplace. The fire instantly burned and then rolled into a twisting whirlpool. At this moment, half of Maria's body had already walked into the whirlpool. Then, she waved at Luocio and Yuyi. Because this is an illegal coordinates, the landing place may be a little remote. You'd better be mentally prepared. Could this be the legendary pheasant car? In a certain seaside city in the Aegean Sea, pure white houses lined up neatly and strangely at the edge of the coast. The city's scenery, which was completely different from that of China, made a certain girl constantly exclaim, wow, and amazing. Sister Long, look, and so on. An elementary school autumn outing. This is looking at the excited butterfly demon. The Shinryu of Kelowna shook his head. Don't go too far. Be careful not to get lost. I won't look for you. I know. Long Shirua smiled helplessly. Then, she walked into an alley and entered a shop that sold fishing tools. Seeing that there were no other customers in the shop, the Shinryu of Kelowna directly said to the staff at the counter, 2 tickets to the inhuman territory. Thank you. What's the exchange rate of demonic energy crystals to secret crystals? 0.89. 1 million. Give me 5,000 units of demonic energy crystals. Longshore thought for a while and then said casually, also, give me a newspaper. I want to rent a messenger. Okay, this is your newspaper. I'll prepare the secret crystals for you right away. Please wait a moment. The Shinryu of Kelowna sat down and began to read the newspaper. After switching between Chinese and simplified Chinese on the upper right corner of the newspaper, he lit a cigarette and began to read. What the hell? The Knights of the Round Table fought against the Orcs? The Queen of Britain is the big winner? The Shinryu of Kelowna shook his head. Nonsense. The Shinryu of Kelowna, who was smoking, simply flipped through the newspaper casually. Then his eyes stopped on a small column on a page. The title was, Bustling. Today, Miluo-chan will teach you how to capture the person you like and explain the love fortune of the 12 constellations this week. The Shinryu of Kelowna sneered. Childish. Sister Long, are you done? The butterfly demon came back. Luo dance. How many times have I told you? Don't suck your fingers while walking. Hurry up and put away your honey pot. Do you want to be a fat butterfly that can't fly and wait for someone to roast you until you're fried? Hashtag PS. 16/30. Genius remembers this site's address in 1 second. Mobile version of reading website. Chapter 1325. The train shuttled through the darkness, the lights flashing by the tracks like flickering lights. The roar of the train was deafening in the tunnel for a long time. After a long time, the spirit which removed her hands from her ears and frowned. She had been in this dark place for most of the day, perhaps even longer. Her patience had even worn out, but Farrell still had not woken up from a certain state. He had been hiding in this place for a long time, ever since Farrell had suddenly left last night. If she had not seen with her own eyes how Farrell broke out of the island prison and beat up 3 knights of the Round Table in an invincible manner, as well as how powerful he was in the first half of the Royal Hall, she would have found it hard to believe that the man in front of her was the legendary man she had released from prison. At this moment, Farrell curled up his body and kept muttering something. Sometimes he panicked, sometimes he trembled. His nerves were so sensitive that they were on the verge of breaking down. This can't go on. The spirit, which became more and more distressed. She still needed to rely on this man to help her find the Acacia record. Obviously, she did not want to wait for Farrell to calm down. Finally, the witch gritted her teeth and approached Farrell. She held his cheeks with both hands and pressed her forehead against his. She tried to use her power to wake Farrell up. As long as she could find the source of any mental disorder, the spirit which had the ability to set things right. What are you afraid of? The whisper sounded like a spell, but also like an ancient language that gently sounded in Farrell's ears. Perhaps you need someone to talk to. Open up your mind for a while, Farrell. Just as her consciousness began to move stealthily and was about to touch the depths of the man's heart, the witch suddenly fell to the ground in pain. Her consciousness seemed to have been burned by endless flames. The pain that came from the depths of her soul made her instantly pale and sweat drip down her back. But at this moment, Farrell stopped his abnormal behavior. It seemed like he had woken up, or he had calmed down. Don't try to pry into my heart. Farrell looked at Miss Julienne and said expressionlessly, if there is one more time, I will personally send you off from this world. Is this how you treat people who have helped you? Miss Witch could not help but feel angry. Fortunately, she was the one who had calmed him down. I didn't ask you to do that. Farrell stood up again and began to tidy up his somewhat messy clothes as he left. Old man, where are you going this time? The witch couldn't be bothered to argue with the old man and quickly got up. They're back. I can't stay idle anymore. Farrell didn't even turn his head. I have to make preparations in advance. I hope I can still make it in time. Them. Miss Witch couldn't help but be startled. She vaguely remembered that Farlier had said something similar before. They, who are you referring to? It's a calamity. Farlier said in a low voice. It's a group of people who play with everyone in the palm of their hand. If we don't resist, we will only become their food. I really don't know if you're awake now, or if you've just turned from a lunatic to a psychopath. Go as far as you can. It's best if you can stay away from the West. You promised to help me find the Acacia record. If I don't die this time, I will fulfill my promise to you. Old man, why don't you die? Miss Witch angrily said, you ungrateful bastard who bullies women. Her voice echoed in the train tunnel, but Miss Witch couldn't see Farrell anymore. She immediately stomped her feet and said resentfully, don't think of going back on your words. Even if I have to go to the ends of the earth, I will find you, old man. I mean it. The next train flew past again. Miss Agile was kneeling on the chair and pressing her hands on the glass of the train. Her eyes were wide open as she looked at everything outside, on this special train to the inhuman domain. There were only 3 such magic trains in the whole Eurasian continent. They would travel on a fixed route every day, connecting the platforms of different countries. Each train would only run once a day. In this carriage, there were no other passengers except Longshaw and Luo Dance. Of course, there were passengers from other platforms. Basically, the platforms of different countries corresponded to the carriages. There were no extra passengers. Longshaw seemed to be in a good mood, so she didn't care about the little butterfly's behavior at this time. Although she was also surprised by the extraordinary civilization of the Western world when she first took this magic train to the inhuman domain. Sister Long, look, the train is flying in the sky. Okay, don't make a fuss. Longshaw pulled the little butterfly's ear at this time. When we get out of the station, don't make a fuss on the road. Try not to attract attention, okay? Also, don't talk without my permission. What? The little butterfly blinked her eyes. She understood the principle of doing more and talking less, but she didn't understand the principle of not talking. You don't speak the language of the Western countries. Longshaw said patiently. Once you speak, you'll expose that you're from Kelowna. The guys in the inhuman domain are not very friendly to the visitors from Kelowna. Why? Longshaw said expressionlessly. In short, don't talk if you don't speak the language of the Western countries. But Sister Long, can you speak it? Of course I can. Longshaw paused and then said disdainfully, I can communicate with them directly with my mind. Why do I have so much trouble? At this time, the conductor on the train pushed a cart into this section of the carriage. It was probably no different from the train in the modern world. There were all kinds of food and drinks on the cart. Of course, the food was probably the specialty of the inhuman domain. When Longshaw was about to reject the stewardess with the so-called mind communication, the little butterfly next to her had already communicated with the stewardess in fluent Western world language and successfully ordered a few things. The true dragon of the divine land with a small chin stared blankly at the stewardess, leaving with a smile before swallowing his saliva. You can speak their language? Yes. Luo Pianran nodded and said casually, I've thought about it for 7:05. What? How dare you say it's only 7:05? Longshaw shook her head and didn't care too much. She said casually, Okay, you can speak after you get out of the station. But still, talk more and watch more. The inhuman domain is more dangerous. Luo Pianran was stunned. She knew that Longshaw was the most powerful person besides the boss, but she seemed to feel that her sister was a bit serious. Sister Long, is there someone more powerful than you here? She asked inconceivably. Longshaw shook her head. You can't say that. I can only say that in the inhuman domain, the upper limit of my power doesn't change, but I will die. The little butterfly monster's expression gradually became sluggish. In the next second, she directly threw away the food in her hand and tightly covered her mouth. What are you doing? Longshaw asked curiously. Luo Pianran just covered her mouth and shook her head. Kelowna Shinryu frowned. What the hell are you doing? We haven't gotten out of the station yet. I won't speak. If you get into danger, Sister Long will die. I don't want Sister Long to die. After saying this sentence quickly and firmly, the little butterfly covered her mouth instantly with a pitiful look. Longshaw laughed, then shook her head and flicked the child's forehead. Little fool, I said I would die, assuming that there is an existence similar to me here, and it intends to die together with me. Really? When did I lie to you? Longshaw rubbed her head and explained, in the inhuman domain, I can't get the power from the Kelowna Dragonland. But in the inhuman domain, there is something called magic element, and the amount of aura is very weak. Magic element is not very suitable for us to absorb, but it can be refined, but the efficiency is too low. Do you understand what I mean? I understand. That is to say, Sister Long doesn't have the power source of the Kelowna Dragonland here, right? Power source? The dragon vein of the Kelowna Dragonland would cry. Probably. Longshaw rolled her eyes. Anyway, that's the case. But if we keep a low profile, there will be no problem. Besides, I'm here to return a favor, not to trample on others' territory. But you haven't told me why people in the inhuman domain are not friendly to the visitors from Kelowna Dragonland. Well, there are various reasons. I can't tell you all at once. Longshaw said perfunctorily, I'll tell you when I have the chance. Why do you have so many questions? Luo Dance giggled. As long as Sister Long is fine. In this way, I can continue to stay with Sister Long. And if Boss is also here, that's the best. Oh, and Sister Zijuan, we're like a family, living together all the time. A family? Longshaw was stunned. A small drama in Shinryu Kelowna's mind suddenly began to play. The plot went like this. Boss, smiling. Sure, you're back. The meal will be ready soon. Do you want to eat or take a bath first? Or, well, take a bath first. Luo Dance. Sister Long, I went to the supermarket with the boss today and bought your favorite brand of beer. Well, good girl. Boss, come on, open your mouth and have a taste. You must be tired after a day's work. Well, not bad. Give me a massage. I'm a bit tired. Pa, Shinryu Kelowna suddenly patted her cheeks with both hands. Damn, what's going on? What on earth am I thinking? Sister Long, what's wrong with you? The little butterfly monster looked at her with surprise. Kill mosquitoes. Mosquitoes? The magic train suddenly jolted. The true dragon of the divine land hurriedly stood up as if he had been saved. He pulled Luo Dance's hand and dragged her into the air. Then he rushed out of the magic train and left the platform like a gust of wind. It was indeed a world fragment. After passing through the flames in the fireplace of Maria's magic house, Luochio had the same feeling as when he entered the world of Yanwuyue. The difference was that in the inhuman domain, there did not seem to be a god's function similar to Yanwuyue, nor was there a so-called divine right. Instead, there was another strange operating system that managed the entire inhuman domain. Wow! Maria's exclamation came directly to his ears. It turned out that after passing through the flames, the place directly reached was not the ground, but the sky. Seeing her body directly hit the ground at a very fast speed, the witch who ran the magic house hurriedly took out her magic wand and pointed it directly to the ground. In a flash, a sapling grew out of the ground at a very fast speed. The leaves of the sapling instantly became bigger and finally caught her at the moment when she hit the ground. But because of the rebound, Miss Witch finally fell to the ground. She hurriedly stood up, but at this moment, Boss Luo had landed steadily and caught the falling Miss Maid with both hands. 10 points. She wanted to say so, but then she suddenly broke out in a cold sweat because Master Pansy said indifferently, Miss Maria, is this the relatively remote place you said? This. Maria forced a smile. After all, it's an illegal coordinate. It's good enough to enter. And I really don't know why it suddenly became a high altitude this time. I clearly appeared on the ground last time. I really didn't lie. Boss Luo put Yi down at this moment, and then looked around. This place seems a bit strange. It's probably terrain alteration. Miss Maid said softly, in the inhuman territory, sometimes the original structure can't be maintained due to the instability of the energy that maintains the territory. Usually, it's expressed as a sudden change of terrain, so it's also called terrain alteration. After the manager here repairs it, it should be able to stabilize. It turned out to be terrain alteration. Maria was thoughtful at this time, and then she quickly said, Both of you, let's leave this place quickly, because the coordinate entered from the territory of the 13 families. We need to pass through this territory, and then we can reach the association's autonomous area, which is also the place where Fafner lives now. If we move quickly, it will take about half a day's journey. The territory of the 13 families? Boss Luo asked curiously. Maria nodded and said casually, Yes, there's a farm of the 13 families nearby. It's a farm used to raise pure bloods in captivity. Those guys are very strict with their food, and they're also very neurotic. If we stay here for a long time and are discovered by them, they will probably think that we are planning to come here to hunt illegally. Farm. Boss Luo said this word carefully. Maria shrugged and said, Don't you know? The pureblood farms are provided for the aristocrats of the 13 families to enjoy, and the portion allocated to other low-level vampires is very small. So, there are also groups that specialize in hunting from the pureblood farms among the Inhumans. They sell to the low-level vampires through the black market. The demand is quite high. Last year, I bought 600 cubic centimeters of pure blood from a pureblood hunter, and it was all snatched in less than an hour. Let's talk while walking. There are often law enforcement teams patrolling nearby. They are all guys that are not to be trifled with. Law enforcement team. Luochio blinked and looked up. Are they wearing black trench coats with blood-colored bat symbols and black military caps? Yes. Haven't you seen them before? Maria was stunned. Yes, I see them now. Boss Luo nodded. Now. Maria opened her mouth, then followed Luochio's gaze, turned around, raised her head, and looked up. Her face instantly collapsed. In midair, there were 10 guys wearing black trench coats and black military caps. They were looking at them with cold eyes. They were lined up in a row. Genius remembered this site's address in 1 second. Mobile version reading website.